Chapter 2975. When Nye Tian saw the scarred martial artist in front of him, his face darkened. It was obvious that this scarred martial artist had been looking for him, and he finally found him. Stinking brat, you killed our Rong clan's 7th young master, and you still dare to show yourself? You really have guts. The scarred man stared at Nye Tian with a murderous look. The crowd was attracted by his voice. They all looked over and started discussing. Who is this brat? He actually dared to kill someone from the Rong clan. It looks like he didn't kill an ordinary person. It seems to be the Rong clan's direct descendant. This is troublesome. The Rong clan is so powerful. This brat will definitely pay with his life for the Rong clan's young master. This little silver hair is really arrogant. He killed the Rong clan's young master, and he still dares to show up. Isn't he looking for death? The crowd talked one after another, and their eyes all locked onto Nye Tian. Brat, it's you. At this time, another voice sounded. Then, a martial artist appeared, pointed at Nye Tian, and shouted, "It's him. He killed our Mu clan's 19th young master and Lord Mu Hengshan." Nye Tian frowned. Looking at the person in front of him, he immediately recognized him. This person was the Mu clan martial artist who escaped from his hands. The sudden scene made everyone's eyes tremble. They were surprised and shocked. Who would have thought that not only did Nye Tian kill the Rong clan's young master, he also killed the Mu clan's young master. This brat is too fierce. He actually killed people from 2 great clans. This guy looks sloppy and ordinary, but he actually killed people from the Rong clan and Mu clan. He's really fierce. This guy is an idiot. He killed the young masters of 2 great clans, and he still dares to appear. He's pretending that nothing happened. The crowd looked at Nye Tian, and their eyes became crooked. TQR1 Nye Tian looked at the crowd. His face did not change much, and he was very calm. However, Feng Qi and Si Xiaoye, who were beside him, could not remain calm. Their faces froze. Nye Tian, did you really kill the people of the Rong family and the Mu family? Feng Qi asked in surprise after a long while. Nye Tian nodded. There wasn't even a hint of nervousness on his face. How dare you? How can you be so calm after killing a member of our Rong family? Do you think our Rong family is easy to bully? At this time, even more Rong clan cultivators arrived. Each and every one of them was overbearing, as if they wanted to skin Nye Tian alive. Killing a member of the Mu clan is the same as slapping the Mu clan in the face. Do you think there's no one in the Mu clan? Immediately, the warriors of the Mu clan surrounded Nye Tian. At Nye Tian's side were people from Saint Spirit Academy, and right now they were unexpectedly deliberately pulling away from him. The people of Saint Spirit Academy wanted to draw a clear line between themselves and him. They didn't want to be implicated by him. Nye Tian, what's going on? Only Bai Ruozhu walked over at this time. She looked at Nye Tian and asked with an ugly expression. There were many pseudo-saint experts among the warriors of the Rong and Mu clans. If they suddenly attacked, Nye Tian would be in danger. Teacher Bai, I did kill the people of the Rong and Mu clans. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said, but I killed them for a reason. Nonsense. What reason do you have to kill the people of the Rong clan? The warriors of the Rong clan roared and were about to attack. Brat, you wanted to steal the sacred Qi whirlpool, so you killed Lord Mu Hengshan. Don't quibble. The warriors of the Mu clan shouted even louder. In an instant, the scene became very intense, as if it was about to get out of control. Enough. Right at this moment, a low roar resounded from within the pavilion. Everyone was surprised. When they turned around and saw the person who spoke, they immediately quieted down. Nye Tian frowned and looked over. It was Feng Qi's 9th uncle, Qin Jingyue, who spoke. Qin Jingyue was a judge invited by the big forces of the Saint Spirit region. Of course, his words were oppressive. Everyone looked at Qin Jingyue, waiting for him to speak. At this moment, the other people in the pavilion also looked at Qin Jingyue. The patriarchs of the Rong and Mu clans didn't speak. They were waiting for Qin Jingyue to speak. Although the matter in front of them was a small matter, if it wasn't handled well, it would probably lead to a war between all the forces. What's the matter? Come here and talk. Qin Jingyue's eyes darkened and he said loudly. Of course, he noticed that Nie Tian and Feng Qi were very close, so he had to be more careful when dealing with the matter in front of him. Nie Tian smiled faintly and walked over. The Rong and Mu clans each sent a representative to a place not far from Nie Tian. Qin Jingyue looked at Nie Tian and paused for a while. Then he said, I saw it all. You admitted that you killed people from the Rong and Mu clans, right? Yes. Nie Tian nodded calmly. Qin Jingyue was surprised by Nie Tian's calmness. He didn't expect a young warrior to be so calm in such a situation. Why did you kill them? Qin Jingyue asked. I killed the seventh young master of the Rong family and other members of the Rong family because I saw Rong Qiwei molesting Yu Re of the Yu family. I didn't kill Rong Qiwei right away. Instead, I let him go. However, he came back with a group of people. That's why I teamed up with Yu Tonghai of the Yu family to fight against the Rong family, Nie Tian said calmly. Nonsense. Just as he finished speaking, a figure in the pavilion stood up and growled, glaring at him with angry eyes. It was a middle-aged warrior. He was short and fat, but his aura was vigorous. He was a rank 9 pseudo-sage expert. He was the current clan leader of the Rong family, Rong Ting. Rong Qiwei, whom Nie Tian killed, was Rong Ting's son. Clan leader Rong, don't get agitated. Let him finish. Qin Jingyue turned to look at Rong Ting and gestured for him to sit down. Qiwei is a pure and kind person. How could he molest the young lady of the Yu family? You're talking nonsense. Rong Ting didn't sit down. Instead, he stared coldly at Nie Tian and shouted. Nie Tian frowned but ignored him. He looked at Qin Jingyue and continued, I killed people from the Mu family because I had some conflict with Murong Jiao when I first came to the Arctic Snow Mountain. After that, I met Murong Jiao. He wanted to kill me and I was forced to fight back. And Murong Jiao wasn't killed by me. He was killed by Mu Hengshan after he brought me to find the sacred whirlpool. After Mu Hengshan killed Murong Jiao, he wanted to kill me and I killed him instead. That's all. I'm done. Nie Tian finished and looked at Qin Jingyue calmly. But just as he finished, the people from the Rong and Mu families erupted. He's lying. Our Rong family's 7th young master would never molest the young lady of the Yu family. He's a homicidal maniac. In order to snatch the sacred whirlpool, he killed Lord Mu Hengshan and young master Murong Jiao. A murderer should not be punished. Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! In the end, the scene was filled with shouts of killing. Quiet! Qin Jingyue frowned and growled. His deep gaze swept across everyone. The scene immediately quieted down. No one dared to speak. Qin Jingyue frowned and thought. Of course, he knew that killing between martial practitioners was a common thing. Also, Nie Tian and the others had entered the Arctic Snow Mountain ahead of time. When they met, it was a fight to the death. Regardless of whether Nie Tian's words were true or false, the fact that he could kill Rong Qiwei and the others was due to his strength. There was no right or wrong. But now that all the factions were watching, it was clear that they wanted Qin Jingyue to judge whether Nie Tian was right or wrong. Can anyone prove what you just said? Qin Jingyue thought for a moment and asked in a low voice. Yu Tonghai and Yu Roar can prove that I killed Rong Qiwei, Nie Tian said coolly. Impossible. But before he finished speaking, a figure in the pavilion stood up and looked coldly at Nie Tian. He said, Yu Roar never came to the Arctic Snow Mountain. Do not slander young Master Rong Qiwei. HM? Nie Tian frowned and asked that person, Who are you? Chapter 2976. The person in the pavilion stood up slowly and revealed his identity. Nie Tian's expression flickered as he narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect the person to be Yu Rua's father, the leader of the Yu clan. What surprised him even more was Yu Qi's words. Although Yu Qi's face was gloomy and angry, Nie Tian could see that he was hiding his uneasiness. Without a doubt, Yu Qi was lying. Yu Qi must have known that Nie Tian had saved Yu Ru, but he didn't defend Nie Tian. Instead, he slandered Nie Tian. Nie Tian had observed that Yu Tonghai and Yu Ru didn't show up. This must have been arranged by Yu Qi. Nie Tian couldn't understand why Yu Qi would lie for the Rong clan. Rongting, the leader of the Rong clan, smirked and looked at Yu Qi strangely. Although this small movement only lasted for a split second, Nie Tian saw it with his own eyes. Yu Qi was avoiding Rongting, as if he was afraid of something. Looks like there's something fishy going on with the Yu clan. Either he received a bribe from the Rong clan, or the Rong clan has something on him, Nie Tian thought to himself. However, he was curious. He was just a nobody, while Yu Qi was the leader of the Yu clan. Was there a need for him to slander him? Young man, you heard what leader you said. What else do you have to say? Rongting, the leader of the Rong clan, stood up again and stared at Nie Tian coldly. Even if I have something to say, would you believe me? Nie Tian smiled. He didn't look nervous at all. Young man, are you going to plead guilty? Rongting's face darkened and he said cold. I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide whether I'll plead guilty or not, Nie Tianling replied coldly. You're about to die, and you still dare to be insolent. How preposterous! Rongting growled. His eyes were filled with malice, and he wished he could personally tear Nie Tian apart. Clan leader Rong. But at this moment a deep voice sounded, and a figure stood up from the pavilion. It was the dean of the Saint Soul Academy, Kuyo Anaguchi. Dean Gigu, do you have anything to say? Rongting was stunned for a moment and looked at Kuyo Anaguchi coldly. Nie Tian is a student of Saint Spirit Academy. I want to protect him. Kuyo Anaguchi coldly said, his eyes slightly closed, his whole body emitting an insufferably domineering aura. He didn't waste any time and directly said that he wanted to protect Nie Tian. His attitude was very domineering. TQR 1-inch Kuyo Anaguchi, aren't your words a little too arrogant? Rongting's face sank as he shouted in a low voice. Nie Tian killed the young master of the Rong family because the young master of the Rong family wasn't strong enough. Can you blame anyone else? Kuyo Anaguchi's cold eyes swept across Rongting and said coldly, if the young master of the Rong family was strong enough, would Nie Tian still have the chance to stand here? You! Rongting's eyes trembled, and he suddenly became speechless. Although Kuyo Anaguchi's words were overbearing, they weren't without reason. In the world of martial arts, the strong were always respected. The law of the jungle, where the big fish eats the small fish, was the biggest truth. Regardless of whether Nie Tian and Rong Chiwei were right or wrong, the one who survived would always be the strong one. Dean Gigu is so domineering. At this moment, another voice was heard. A tall man with a pale face stood up and stared at Kuyo Anaguchi. He said coldly, this kid called Nie Tian killed the people of my Mu family with his strength and stole the sacred Qi whirlpool that was discovered by my Mu family. Dean Gigu, do you want to give my Mu family an explanation? This tall man was none other than the Mu family's patriarch, Mu Xinghe. Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes slightly narrowed, and he couldn't help but glance at Nie Tian. He didn't expect that Nie Tian would actually obtain a sacred Qi whirlpool. This was a good thing. Patriarch Mu, did you not hear what I said just now? Kuyo Anaguchi smiled faintly and said, in the world of martial arts, the strong are always respected. The sacred Qi whirlpool doesn't belong to your Mu family. Can't Nie Tian fight for it? Kuyo Anaguchi, you are forcibly shielding him. Mu Xinghe's face suddenly darkened, and his face was full of anger. Whatever you say, whoever wants to touch Nie Tian will have to go through me first. Gue Gigu responded in a domineering and cold manner. When the onlookers saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but flicker, and many people began to discuss in a low voice. Who is this kid called Nyetian? Dean Saint Soul is actually willing to directly offend two big families to protect him. This kid's strength is sloppy and ordinary, there is nothing powerful about him. I really don't know how he could kill the people of the Rong family and the Mu family. Could it be that this kid is the young master of a big hidden force, and there is a terrifying expert hiding around him? When the onlookers were discussing, they couldn't help but look at Nyetian with fear. It was already strange that Nyetian killed the people of the Rong family and the Mu family. Now that Kuyo Oneguchi was protecting him, his identity became even more mysterious. When the people of the Saint Soul Academy saw that Kuyo Oneguchi was protecting Nyetian, they of course didn't dare to casually reveal Nyetian's identity. These people were even more curious. Why would Kuyo Oneguchi protect the son of a traitor? Kuyo Oneguchi, it seems that I am very important to you, you don't want me to die. Nyetian looked at Kuyo Oneguchi, and the corner of his mouth slightly twitched. He already knew that Kuyo Oneguchi would definitely stand out to protect him. However, Kuyo Oneguchi's determination and overbearingness still surprised him. At this moment, he was even more certain that he was very important to Kuyo Oneguchi. Kuyo Oneguchi, you are shielding this person. I can't stand it. At this moment, another person stood up from the pavilion. This person was wearing a black mask, and black runes circled around his body. He looked very strange. This person was the principal of the Netherworld Academy, another academy on the same level as the Saint Soul Academy, Li Jin. The Saint Soul Academy and the Netherworld Academy had always been at odds. It wasn't strange for Li Jin to stand out now. Li Jin, so what if you can't stand it? Kuyo Oneguchi stared at Li Jin cold, not backing down at all. Kuyo Oneguchi, do you really think that you are very strong? So strong that you can fight against the three of us at the same time? Li Jin laughed coldly as his gaze swept across Mu Xinghe and Rongting. It was obvious that he was colluding with the two great families to threaten Kuyo Oneguchi. Although the 10 great powers of the Holy Soul Domain were considered the same, there were still differences in strength. The one church, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties were actually ranked according to their strength. The Saint Soul Academy and the Netherworld Academy were on par. But if the Mu family and the Rong family were included, it would be a completely different story. Li Jin's own strength was no weaker than Kuyo Oneguchi. If he colluded with Mu Xinghe and Rongting, Kuyo Oneguchi would not be a match for the three of them. As soon as Li Jin's voice fell, the atmosphere instantly became tense. No one would have thought that such a small matter would develop to such an extent. Would the 4 great powers really start a war over a mere Nyetian? So what if it's the 3 of you? I, Kuyo Oneguchi, am not afraid. Kuyo Oneguchi was still as cold as ever. Chapter 2977. Li Jin took a step forward, and his aura directly shattered the pavilion. The atmosphere instantly became extremely tense, and a great battle was about to break out. All the forces had gathered here for the Sacred World Seed, but now, the leaders of the 4 forces were actually going to fight. This was something that no one had expected. Wait! At this moment, 2 voices rang out at almost the same time. It was Qin Jingyue and Nyetian. Qin Jingyue and Nyetian were stunned at the same time. They looked at each other in surprise. Nyetian, what else do you have to say? Qin Jingyue reacted and looked at Nyetian with fiery eyes. He did not come here for the Sacred World Seed. Instead, he was purely here to be an adjudicator. Of course, he did not become an adjudicator for nothing. He had received rather generous rewards from the various forces. Moreover, after the matter of the Sacred World Seed was settled, he would receive even more generous rewards. Therefore, he did not want the various forces to fight first. Lord Adjudicator, since these people are trying to reason with me, then I'll properly reason with them. Nyetian looked at Qin Jingyue and smiled faintly. I still have someone beside me who can prove what I just said. I'll invite him out now. Qin Jingyue's eyes trembled slightly. He could not help but be curious as to who Nie Tian would invite at this time. In this situation, if Nie Tian invited an unimportant person, even if he could prove what he said, it would not be able to convince the masses. Nie Tian smiled faintly. With a thought, a space-time halo flashed on his body. The next moment, a wretched-looking old man appeared beside him. It was Feng Shutong. Actually, Nie Tian had wanted Feng Shutong to come out earlier, but he wanted to see if Kuyo Oniguchi would stand out. Since Feng Shutong was a member of the Myriad Domains Guild and was also Feng Qi's grandfather, his identity was naturally not simple. No one present could refute what he said. When the crowd saw the wretched-looking old man beside Nie Tian, they were first stunned, then they burst into laughter. Is this kid joking? Where did they find such a wretched old man? Who would believe his words? That little old man is skinny and small like a monkey, and yet he's only a demi-saint at his age. He's definitely a small fry. That lad is really stupid. To think that he would invite an old man like that. He's just making a fool out of himself. Everyone looked at Feng Shutong. They didn't put him in their eyes at all, and they even cursed at him. But when Qin Jingyue saw Feng Shutong, his face froze. He was so shocked that he froze on the spot. In the distance, Feng Qi was also stunned. His eyes were wide open, and he could not believe the scene in front of him. Elder Feng, there's something I'd like you to prove. Nie Tian didn't care about other people's reactions. He smiled and explained the situation. TQR 1 inch yes. Feng Shutong heavily nodded his head and said, Little brat Nie's words are all true. This old man can prove it. After that, he hurriedly said to Nie Tian, Little brat Nie, I've proven it. Let me go back now. I still have things to do. But in the next moment, the crowd burst into laughter. Who does this old thing think he is? That he can just say a few words? He must be an idiot. Does he really think he's some big shot? This old man is obviously on Nie Tian's side. How can we believe his words? It's pure bullsh**. The crowd was talking loudly, not taking Feng Shutong's proof seriously at all. Elder Feng, it seems that your words are useless. Nie Tian smiled bitterly and shook his head. How dare you? Feng Shutong growled. He then turned around to look at Qin Jingyue and said loudly, Qin Jingyue, do you think my words can be trusted? Everyone's face stiffened when they saw that. They didn't expect Feng Shutong to call Qin Jingyue by his name. Qin Jingyue was stunned for a long time. When he heard what the crowd said, his face turned ugly. At this moment, he looked at Feng Shutong, gulped and said, Godfather, why are you here? Godfather. Hearing how Qin Jingyue called Feng Shutong, everyone's eyes trembled and they were stunned on the spot. Nie Tian was also stunned. He couldn't react for a long time. How could he have known that Feng Shutong was Qin Jingyue's godfather? No wonder Qin Jingyue was a member of the Feng clan but didn't have the surname Feng. He was Feng Shutong's godson. Why can't I be here? Do I have to greet you wherever I go? Feng Shutong rolled his eyes and said to Nie Tian, Little brat Nie, I've said what I want to say. Let me go back now. Okay. Nie Tian smiled faintly and opened 9 extremes to let Feng Shutong go back. Since Uncle Feng had testified and revealed his identity, then everything was enough. Feng Shutong's figure disappeared. The scene was dead silent. One could hear a pin drop. At this time, Kuyo Oniguchi was the first to speak. He asked with a faint smile, Lord Adjudicator, may I ask if that old man was the tri-absolute ghost genius, Master Feng Shutong? Yes. Qin Jingyue nodded. His face was much calmer. He knew that his godfather had a strange temper, but the scene just now still surprised him. Tri-absolute ghost genius, Feng Shutong. When the people around Kuyo Oniguchi heard this name, their faces stiffened. They couldn't say anything for a long time. The name Tri-Absolute Ghost Genius was very famous in the entire Myriad domain. It was Feng Shudong's name. The reason why Feng Shutong had this name was because his attainments in alchemy, sealing, and enchantment had reached the pinnacle of the Myriad domain. Alchemy, sealing, and enchantment, it was not easy to specialize in one. Not to mention mastering all three. Hence, Feng Shutong was known as the Tri-Absolute Ghost Genius. He was a unique existence in the entire Myriad domain. Although Feng Shutong was famous, his temper was eccentric and his whereabouts were erratic. Hence, there were very few people who had actually seen him. Furthermore, Feng Shutong had another identity. He was an Empyrean Elder of the Myriad Domain Association. An Empyrean Elder was the most respected existence in the Myriad Domain Association apart from the President. One could imagine how high his status was. After thoroughly understanding Feng Shudong's identity, Li Jin and the others had ugly expressions. As for the surrounding crowd, most of them were still at a loss. Feng Shutong was famous among the big shot. Normal people would not understand what the Tri-Absolute Ghost Genius meant. So this old thing's status is so high, Nie Tian said in his heart when he saw Li Jin and the others' expressions. He knew that Feng Shudong's status was very high, but he absolutely did not expect it to be this high. Dean Li, Clan Chief Mu, Clan Chief Rong, you all heard my godfather's words, right? At this time, Qin Jingyue calmed down. His gaze swept across Li Jin and the others. With a cold gaze, he said, Nie Tian's matter ends here. Li Jin and the others' expressions were ugly to the extreme. Although they were unwilling, they still nodded. Qin Jingyue wanted the matter to end here because he did not want to make things too ugly for everyone. He wanted to leave some leeway for both sides. Chapter 2978. And so, the storm came to an end. Qin Jingyue looked at Nie Tian for a long time, wondering why the latter would be involved with Feng Shutong. It took a long time for the scene to calm down. Many were looking at Nie Tian with different gazes. Fear, doubt, shock, and all sorts of other emotions were mixed together, their expressions extremely complex. Then, everyone waited quietly. To successfully break the holy barrier of the Holy Realm Seed, various factions had invited some formation masters. Some of the formation masters had yet to arrive. About half an hour later, there was a commotion outside the valley, and a green-robed elder entered the valley, escorted by the crowd. The people in the valley automatically parted, forming two sides. The green-robed elder smiled and walked over quickly. Grand Master Su. Dean Li Jin of the Abyss Academy was very enthusiastic when he saw the green-robed elder, hurrying up to greet him. The green-robed old man in front of him was called Su Chen. He was ranked in the top 3 of the 10,000 Domain Formation Grandmasters ranking. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Su Chen. Su Chen's spiritual energy was very powerful, as vast and boundless as an ocean. Yeah. That old man is a demi-saint tier 8 divine formation master. Having such a level of formation cultivation in the realms is already not bad. That was when the fat cat's voice echoed and spoke flatly. Beyond level 9, the divine alchemists and formation masters of the realms were also divided into demi-saints, demi-saint, and pseudo-saints, as well as levels 1 to 9. Still, there was not much difference between a demi-saint level 1 and a demi-saint level 8, and the only difference was the amount of spiritual energy. The further one progressed in the art of formations, the more difficult it became. Moreover, there were too many things that could be integrated into a formation, such as seals, barriers, and so on. That was why it was even more difficult to improve in the art of formations. In the 10,000 domains, the best divine alchemists could reach the pseudo-saint level 9, while the best divine formation masters were only demi-saint level 9. There was not a single pseudo-saint divine formation master in the 10,000 domains. Mu Shuijing, whom Nie Tian had met in the frozen ruins, was merely a demi-saint divine formation master, but was already known as the number 1 divine formation master there. That was why Su Chen, a demi-saint tier 8 divine array master, could become one of the top 3 array masters in the myriad domains. Everyone, sorry to have kept you waiting. Su Chen walked forward and smiled faintly as his gaze swept across everyone. You're too kind, Master Su. Qin Jingyue walked over and bowed slightly to show his respect. Even if he was a member of the Myriad Domain Guild, when he saw an array master like Su Chen, he also had to be respectful. The others stepped forward and exchanged pleasantries. Even an overbearing person like Kuyo Onaguchi had to bow his head in front of Su Chen. Su Chen was a formation grandmaster invited by the 7 major forces. Whether or not they could break the Saint Energy Restriction formation of the Sacred World Seed depended on Su Chen, so how could they not be courteous to him? Everyone, you guys are way too courteous. How can I, Su, accept this? Su Chen smiled faintly. Then, he glanced at the crowd and suddenly said, These people must be the elites of the Saint Soul region. Why didn't they greet me when they saw me? Qin Jingyue was taken aback for a moment, then he said loudly, Let me introduce everyone. This is Master Su Chen, one of the top 3 array masters in the Myriad Domain. You guys are really lucky to be able to meet Master Su Chen. Everyone's eyes trembled slightly. Then, they immediately understood and bowed in unison. Greetings, Master Su. Tens of thousands of people shouted in unison. Their voices were thunderous and extremely imposing. When Nye Tian saw this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a slight smile. He thought to himself, This formation master is really interesting. He says he's sorry, but then he comes up with this. He really likes to show off. Su Chen had a high attainment in array formations, but he was arrogant and loved to be in the limelight. It was as if he was afraid that others did not know that he was an array master. Su Chen nodded slightly. His face was full of smiles. Then, he said, Since I'm here, let's get started. This guy did not waste any time. As soon as he arrived, he was ready to enter the Saint Energy Restriction formation of the Sacred World Seed. Master Su, please wait a moment. There are still 2 array masters who have not arrived. Qin Jingyue stepped forward and said with a faint smile. Su Chen's face darkened at Qin Jingyue's words. You guys even invited other divine array masters? Are you doubting my ability in array formations? Well, Qin Jingyue looked embarrassed and quickly said, Of course not. We were just afraid that Master Su would be overworked. That's why we invited 2 array masters to assist you from the side. That's more like it. Su Chen's expression improved a little. Aside from those 2 old monsters who are about to die, no one would dare to call themselves master before me. That's true. Qin Jingyue nodded and could only go along with Su Chen. Nye Tian could not help but shake his head and smile at the sight. This array master really has no bounds to his arrogance. Idiot. It was then that the Ghost Emperor's voice rang. A mere demi-saint divine array master is nothing more than trash. He's not even fit to carry my shoes. Heh. That fellow is good enough to carry my shoes. The fat cat's voice rang as well. After that, the crowd did not have to wait for long before another commotion occurred outside the valley. Soon, 2 old men appeared, walking side by side with a group of people following behind them. Master Mu, Master Ku. Qin Jingyue quickly took a step forward and greeted the 2 old men respectfully. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw one of the 2 old men. The corner of his mouth twitched as he laughed. Mu Shuijing is here as well. It turned out that one of the old men was very familiar to Nye Tian. It was Mu Shuijing, the disciple he had taken in back in the frozen ruins. TQR1 Nye Tian never imagined that Mu Shuijing would be here as well. Mu Shuijing and the other old man quickly stepped forward. Both of them saw Su Chen and walked towards him. You must be Master Su Chen, ranked 3rd on the list of array masters. It's an honor to meet you. Mu Shuijing smiled brightly and took a step forward, bowing slightly. Master Su, I apologize for my lack of manners. The other old man bowed as well, showing respect to Su Chen. Su Chen, however, held his head high, his nostrils flipping up to the sky as he responded very calmly. Mu Shuijing and the other old man's faces stiffened and instantly turned ugly. They had long heard that Su Chen was arrogant, but they did not expect him to be that arrogant. Master Su, allow me to introduce you. This is Master Mu Shuijing, and this is Master Ku Wu. Qin Jingyue looked awkward at the sight and quickly took a step forward. Chapter 2979. Su Chen's voice was not loud, but to Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu, it sounded like thunder. After saying that, Su Chen turned around and walked away. Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu's faces were as ugly as bitter gourds. Master Mu, Master Ku, I'm really sorry. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Seeing the situation, Qin Jingyue hurriedly spoke up. He could only take the blame. Forget it. Since they look down on us, why should we stay? Brother Ku, let's leave. Mu Shuijing frowned and said coldly after a pause. He was also a very arrogant person. How could he tolerate such cowardice? It's better if we leave. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. Su Chen paused. He did not even turn around and said loudly. He was so arrogant that he was born in his mother's womb. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere became dead silent and oppressive. Who would have thought that the three array masters would fight among themselves before they even worked together? Let's go. Mu Shuijing's face was so dark that it looked like blood was dripping from it. With a low growl, he turned around and left. Master Ku Wu, who did not speak much, also waved his sleeves angrily and left. TQR one after all, they were respected array masters. Yet, they were looked down upon by Su Chen. What was the point of staying here? Master Mu, Master Ku, don't leave. Qin Jingyue hurriedly followed, trying to pull Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu back. Let them go. With 2 less burdens, I can break the array faster. Isn't that better? Just then, Su Chen's voice was heard again. He laughed wildly. Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu were so angry that they almost bled. They immediately quickened their pace. This. Qin Jingyue's face froze. He knew that there was no turning back and was momentarily speechless. If he knew this would happen, he would not have invited Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu. Behind Qin Jingyue, Kuyo Oniguchi and the rest also looked embarrassed. However, they did not try to stop Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu. If Su Chen could not coexist with Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu, they could only choose to keep Su Chen. Mu Shuijing, since you are here, why are you in such a hurry to leave? It's not bad to stay and watch the show. At this moment, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure walked out from the crowd. The crowd was stunned at first, but when they saw the face of the figure, their expressions stiffened. The person who stood out at this time was actually Nie Tian. Nie Tian had just almost caused a war between the 4 major forces. He had already stolen the limelight. What did he want to do now? Moreover, he had even called Mu Shuijing by his name. Wasn't this courting death? Calling him by his name was a great disrespect to an array master. Even Qin Jingyue had to address Master Mu respectfully, let alone him. When Mu Shuijing heard Nie Tian's voice, his tensed old face suddenly darkened. Following which, a look of pleasant surprise surged in his eyes. His body froze, and he abruptly turned around, exclaiming, "Teacher!" He had never imagined that he would actually see Nie Tian here. Just now, he was so angry with Su Chen that he didn't observe the people around him at all. He was overjoyed to see Nie Tian. "Teacher!" At his voice, everyone's eyes shuddered violently. Their faces were instantly petrified as they were left dumbfounded on the spot. They had heard it clearly. Mu Shuijing had actually called Nie Tian teacher. How could that be? A great array master was actually Nie Tian's disciple? What kind of joke was that? One after another, stunned gazes were directed at Nie Tian, with what the F*** written all over their faces. Mu Shuijing, you're not bad. You're already a demi-saint array master. Nie Tian looked at Mu Shuijing calmly and said with a smile. The last time they met, Mu Shuijing was still a demi-saint array master. Now he was a demi-saint array master, a huge improvement. This disciple's improvement is all thanks to teacher's guidance. Mu Shuijing reacted and quickly walked to Nie Tian's side. His demeanor was so respectful that he did not look like a array master at all, and was completely an obedient disciple. His rapid improvement in array mastery was all thanks to the array blueprints of the Ghost Emperor's tomb that Nie Tian had given him back then. Every day, he would study the array blueprints painstakingly, which was why he could improve so rapidly today. The crowd's eyes were completely dumbfounded at the sight. Brother Ku, come quickly. Let me introduce you. This is my teacher. Mu Shuijing then pulled the stiff kunai to him and said excitedly, Brother Mu, your formation blueprint, it was this Grandmaster who gave it to you? Ku Wu finally reacted. His tongue spun around in his mouth, and he finally managed to complete his sentence. Yes. Mu Shuijing nodded solemnly. Brother Ku, I've told you before that my teacher is an unparalleled array master. That array blueprints was something that teacher had deconstructed in a very short time. So that's really the case. Kunai's eyes were trembling violently. His gaze towards Nie Tian was immeasurably worshipful, his expression as if he was on a pilgrimage, and he was just short of prostrating before Nie Tian. Shuijing, this is your friend, right? Not bad, he's already a rank 9 half-sage divine array master. Nie Tian looked at Kunai without any expression on his face as he said with a faint smile. When Kunai heard Nie Tian's words, he was stunned. His eyeballs were about to pop out of their socket. When a divine array master reached the later stages, it was very difficult to perceive their strength. Nie Tian only took a glance at him and was able to say that his attainments in array blueprints were truly terrifying. At this moment, in Kunai's heart, Nie Tian was simply an existence akin to a god. Teacher, Brother Ku has always wanted to study that array blueprints with me. If we are together, we can communicate more and help each other. It's just that without teacher's permission, disciple doesn't dare to make a decision. I wonder if teacher... At this time, Mu Shuijing remembered something important and hurriedly asked Nie Tian for instructions. The array blueprints are yours. You can do whatever you want with them. Before Mu Shuijing could finish speaking, Nie Tian said with a faint smile. Thank you, teacher. Mu Shuijing's eyes lit up and he hurriedly bowed to express his gratitude. Thank you, master. Kunai was even more excited. He nodded repeatedly and was so excited that he was about to jump up. When the crowd saw the scene in front of them, their faces were stiff and numb. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. After a long time, the crowd's expressions finally eased up a little. Regardless of whether they accepted it or not, they had to admit that Nie Tian was indeed Mu Shuijing's teacher. Mu Shuijing, a dignified array master, couldn't possibly put on an act here for fun. On the other side, Kuyo Oniguchi and Huairu had the most complicated expressions. The difference was that Kuyo Oniguchi had an incomparably shocked and complicated expression, while Huairu had an incomparably joyful and complicated expression. Mu Shuijing, Kunai, you two fools. You've really thrown away the face of divine array masters. At this time, a maniacal laughter rang out. It was Su Chen. He said loudly, You've actually acknowledged a child who's still wet behind the ears as your teacher. You even said that he's some unparalleled array master. Do you think everyone is a 3-year-old child? Su Chen, you can look down on me, Mu Shuijing. But if you dare to look down on teacher, I'll fight you to the death. Before Nie Tian could speak, Mu Shuijing let out a strange cry and actually wanted to charge forward. However, Nie Tian stretched out his hand to block Mu Shuijing. He smiled faintly and said, Shuijing, we don't have to lower ourselves to the level of an idiot. His voice was very calm, but it was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. Chapter 2980. As soon as Nye Tian's voice fell, the entire place was dead silent. All eyes were focused on him, as if suspecting that their ears were playing tricks on them. Nye Tian actually called Su Chen an idiot in front of so many people. Who was Su Chen? He was the third-ranked array master in the Myriad Territories. Even the Myriad Territories Guild's guild leader had to address him as a master. But now, he was actually called an idiot by someone he couldn't even be bothered to look at. How could he accept this? What did you say, you stinking brat? The moment of dead silence was broken by Su Chen's roar. His eyes were trembling, the muscles on his face were trembling, and his entire body was trembling. Even the blood in his body was trembling. Without a doubt, this was the trembling of rage. Su Chen had lived for so long, and no one had ever dared to call him an idiot. If he didn't vent this anger, he would definitely suffocate to death. I said that you are an idiot. Nye Tian looked at Su Chen, smiled faintly, and said, Your attainments in array formations aren't even worthy of carrying my shoes. You? Su Chen's pupils suddenly constricted. He pointed at Nye Tian and was about to speak, but his chest felt stuffy. His body swayed, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. He was angered by Nye Tian to the point of vomiting blood. He was an arrogant person, but now, he felt that his arrogance was being trampled on. It was as if Nye Tian was wantonly stepping on his face in front of everyone. Vomiting blood just like that? Nye Tian laughed and said loudly, Looks like not only are you an idiot, but you're also a narrow-minded idiot. Su Chen's eyes trembled violently, and he actually spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession. His old face turned deathly pale. If Nye Tian said a few more words, he would probably vomit blood to death. Stinking brat, you're courting death. At this moment, a deep and powerful roar sounded from behind Su Chen. Then, a terrifying aura soared into the sky, instantly turning into an overwhelming pressure that enveloped Nye Tian. Impudent! At the same time, another voice rang out. A terrifying aura erupted and pressed down on the space. Bang! In the next moment, the two forces collided, and a terrifying muffled sound erupted in the void. A violent wave of air surged in all directions. At this moment, the figure behind Su Chen was knocked back repeatedly. After stabilizing his body, he vomited a mouthful of blood. This cultivator was Su Chen's bodyguard. When he saw Su Chen vomiting blood repeatedly, he couldn't help but make a move. However, he didn't expect that someone had been guarding against him. Thank you, Lord Adjudicator. Nye Tian smiled and thanked Qin Jingyue. The person who attacked just now was Qin Jingyue. Qin Jingyue only had the strength of a 7th-order pseudo-holiness, but he relied on his aura to injure Su Chen's 8th-order pseudo-holiness guard. Mr. Nye Tian, it's good that you're fine. Qin Jingyue smiled faintly. Even the way he addressed Nye Tian had changed. He vaguely felt that Nye Tian was hiding a shocking secret. Mu Shuijing turned out to be Nye Tian's disciple, and Nye Tian had a close relationship with Feng Shutong. When these things were connected, Qin Jingyue couldn't help but treat Nye Tian differently. Qin Jingyue, what do you mean by this? At this moment, Su Chen was completely enraged and growled like a wild beast. Master Su, Mr. Nye Tian only had a small argument with you. You don't have to kill him. Qin Jingyue frowned and said coldly. To be honest, he couldn't stand Su Chen's arrogance. Qin Jingyue, didn't you hear that this kid insulted me? Su Chen almost went crazy. He shouted, I order you to kill him. Qin Jingyue frowned and decided not to hold it in anymore. He said directly, Master Su, you have no right to order me. You're the array master we invited to help us break the array. If you don't want to break the array, you can leave. You! Su Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. The stuffiness in his chest almost made him explode. Master Su, let's go. The guard took a step forward and said in a deep voice. Pointing at Nye Tian, Su Chen bellowed, I'm not leaving. I'm going to kill him. Like a shrew, he shouted, I'm not leaving. The crowd was completely stunned. How could they have expected things to turn out this way? Master Su, since you want me dead, I'll give you a chance. At this moment, Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Let's make a bet. Let's bet who can break the Saint Force Forbidden Array. Whoever breaks the Forbidden Array will be the winner. The loser will be at the winner's mercy. What do you think? His calm voice contained a hint of mockery and provocation. When Su Chen heard Nye Tian's words, his eyes trembled violently and he shouted without hesitation, Deal. He did not believe that Nye Tian was a array master at all. Therefore, he was certain that he would win this bet. If he did not take such a bet, he would really be an idiot. Everyone's expression changed at the same time and they were shocked. Nye Tian and Su Chen were betting with their lives. TQR 1-inch bastard, you're dead. Su Chen glared at Nye Tian and said with a murderous look. However, Nye Tian's face was calm and there was no emotion in his eyes. He had two array masters by his side. Why would he be afraid of Su Chen? After a while, everyone calmed down and began to walk deeper into the valley. The entrance to the Sacred Realm Seed was in the deepest part of the valley. The valley was narrow and wide. After walking for a long time, the crowd finally saw the end of the valley. Soon, the crowd arrived at the end of the valley. The scene that greeted them shocked them to their core. In midair, the towering mountain walls on both sides were like two giants that stood between heaven and earth. The mountain walls were covered with a layer of strange black runes. The runes flowed on the mountain walls like burning black flames. What was even more strange was that there was a huge cave between the two mountain walls. The cave was as dark as night and there was an extremely cold aura, as though it led to the abyss of hell. Is this the entrance to the Sacred Realm Seed? When everyone saw this, their faces were filled with shock and their voices were trembling. This was completely different from the Saint Energy Restrictive Formation that they had expected. Nye Tian looked at the huge cave and felt a sinister aura. It was as though there was an invisible giant hand that was trying to grab him. Nye Tian, this is not an ordinary Saint Energy Restrictive Formation. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard and there was a hint of seriousness and worry in it. What do you mean? Nye Tian furrowed his brows and asked in a low voice. I'm afraid this Sacred Realm Seed is not ordinary. Fat Cat's voice was heard again. Her eyes could not help but tremble. Watch out! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and he was about to ask something else when he heard Fat Cat scream. Boom! At this moment, an extremely sinister aura was suddenly released from the huge cave. Then, a huge skeletal hand appeared and reached out from the cave to grab them. At this moment, Nye Tian's expression changed and he broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 2981. Boom! In the huge cave that was as dark as the night, the giant skeletal hand suddenly burst out, bursting out with a majestic and terrifying aura. The skeletal hand was tens of thousands of meters long and every single bone could be seen clearly. However, the strange thing was that the entire hand was black in color. On top of that, there were black fire runes that flowed and surged, emitting a suffocating and eerie aura. Buzz. Creak, creak, creak. Suddenly, the void suddenly sank, and there was a sound of pressure that sounded like a groan. Wherever the 5 fingers of the skeletal hand passed, the space would directly split, and cracks in time and space would appear. It was like an abyss, and in the next moment, it would devour everything. Everyone was shocked by this sudden scene. Many of them froze on the spot and could not move. Everyone moved back. In this moment of life and death, Qin Jingyue remained calm. He roared and was the first to rush forward. His aura gushed out of his body and rushed towards the skeletal hand in the sky. Boom! 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 At the same time, Kuyo Oniguchi, Li Jin, and the other powerhouses made their moves as well. Waves of ferocious attacks shot towards the skeletal hand like mad dragons. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Following that, a terrifying rumble sounded in the sky. Waves of violent energy spread out and wreaked havoc in the sky. The heavens and earth wailed and the mountains crumbled. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the skeletal hand crushed all the attacks and pressed down on the valley. Oh no! Qin Jingyue's eyes widened and he screamed. He could not hide the panic on his face. Everyone, let's attack together. In a split second, Kuyo Oniguchi roared. Following that, golden light gushed out of his body and shot towards the sky with a terrifying force. The power of this boundless golden light was shockingly the god-binding power that he had plundered from Nie Fenghua. Boom, boom, boom. Li Jin and the other powerhouses saw this and their eyes darkened. They no longer held back and attacked. Boom, boom, boom. Following which, a series of violent attacks bombarded the giant skeletal hand. The giant black bone joint finally couldn't withstand the attacks and began to crack. Boom. Just as the skeletal hand was about to descend, it finally collapsed and turned into black flame runes that filled the sky before dissipating. After a long time, the black flame runes in the valley disappeared completely. TQR1 The crowd's eyes were dull, and they all looked like they had yet to recover from the shock. The scene just now was too terrifying. The power of the skeletal hand was beyond everyone's understanding of martial arts. At this time, the 8 strongest people present, Holy Soul Academy's Dean Kuyo Oniguchi, Abysmal Dean Li Jin, Mu Family's Patriarch Mu Xinghe, Rong Family's Patriarch Rong Ting, Yu Family's Patriarch Yu Qi, Xiantian Empress Xiao Lin, Holy Moon Emperor Jing Xing, and Adjudicator Qin Jingyue. These 8 people were all injured. Furthermore, judging from their pale faces, their injuries were not light. Just now, the 8 of them had joined forces twice to barely block the giant skeletal hand. These 8 people might not be the strongest in the myriad domains, but they were definitely top-notch experts, especially Kuyo Oniguchi and Li Jin, who were already at the pinnacle. However, the 8 of them had only barely managed to block the giant skeletal hand, and all of them were even injured. The strength of the giant skeletal hand was unimaginable. Nie Tian. Just as everyone was slowly coming to their senses, a horrified voice suddenly rang out. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and the scene that entered their eyes caused their expressions to change again. Nie Tian stood rooted to the ground, his expression blank, as if he were a piece of wood. However, his right demon eye was bleeding profusely. The blood flowed down from the corner of his eye all the way to his lower jaw, like tears of blood. Wherever the tears of blood passed, a glaring blood mark was left on Nie Tian's face. The blood mark was like a crimson curse rune, engraved on Nie Tian's face. This! Everyone gasped, stunned by the scene in front of them. They had no idea what was going on. Feng Qi, what's going on? Qin Jingyue walked over and asked with a gloomy expression. I don't know either. Feng Qi shook his head and said in shock, when I sensed that something was wrong with Nie Tian, he was already in this state. Qin Jingyue frowned when he saw Nie Tian's dull expression, as if he had fallen into some kind of illusion. At this moment, Empress Xiantian Xiao Lin walked over and said with a frown, "This is not an illusion. His divine consciousness seems to be controlled by some kind of terrifying power." She was someone with the blood eyes of the illusory knight, and her perception was very strong, especially when it came to illusions. She was very sure that Nie Tian was not being controlled by an illusion. Vaguely, she felt that there was an unusually terrifying mental strength in Nie Tian's divine consciousness, and it was this mental strength that was controlling Nie Tian's divine consciousness. But the strange thing was that she could not perceive where this mental strength came from. Ninth uncle, how do we wake Nie Tian up in this state? Feng Qi was worried that Nie Tian's divine consciousness would collapse, so he looked at Qin Jingyue and asked, "Don't move." Qin Jingyue frowned and said, "We can only wait. If we forcibly wake him up, I'm afraid that it will cause a great impact to his divine consciousness and cause it to collapse. N. Feng Qi nodded and looked at Nie Tian nervously. The others held their breath and did not dare to make too much noise. After a moment, Nie Tian suddenly let out a soft groan, and his dull eyes trembled slightly, then surged with a bright light. Nie Tian. Feng Qi saw that Nie Tian had woken up and shouted in surprise. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed, his face filled with great shock. Nie Tian, are you okay? Feng Qi looked at Nie Tian and asked cautiously. Qin Jingyue stopped Feng Qi and motioned the latter not to speak, to give Nie Tian some time to wake up. It seemed that Nie Tian had just experienced a terrible thing and had not yet calmed down. After a long time, Nie Tian exhaled a deep breath, and his horrified expression finally eased. But the shock in his heart could not be calmed. In that instant, he saw a pair of extremely cold and sinister evil eyes. To be more precise, it was his devil's eye that saw this pair of evil eyes. At that moment, his divine sense instantly entered a strange space. The surroundings were bone-piercingly cold, and the chill was extremely sharp. And in the center of this space was the pair of cold evil eyes. After that, Nie Tian felt the devil's eye shed tears of blood, and his divine consciousness finally woke up. Just when Nie Tian woke up, Fat Cat's voice sounded and said in a deep voice, "Devil's eye weeps blood." Fat, what did you find? Nie Tian became cold and asked with a frown. Before he saw the cold evil eyes, Fat Cat seemed to have noticed that something was wrong, and now, Fat Cat said that the devil's eye weeps blood. What did this mean? Nie Tian, you can't enter this cave. Fat Cat did not answer Nie Tian, but said in a deep voice, "Why?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he froze. Chapter 2982. After hearing Nie Tian's words, the Fat Cat fell silent for a long time before saying, "Nie Tian, this sacred realm seed was not nurtured by the heavens and earth. It was man-made." "How is that possible?" Nie Tian was stunned when he heard the Fat Cat's words. Then, his expression froze and he exclaimed in his heart, "How is that possible? The sacred realm seed was not nurtured by the heavens and earth. It was man-made." Was the Fat Cat joking? This was a sacred realm seed, something that could transform a territory into a sacred realm. What kind of person could create a sacred realm seed? Nie Tian felt that even a real sage could not create a sacred realm seed, right? Nie Tian, I'm not joking. This Saint World seed was definitely created by someone. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out again, this time with great certainty. Indeed. Before he could finish his sentence, the Ghost Emperor said, "A naturally formed sacred realm seed will only be accompanied by a sacred energy formation. There will definitely be nothing else. The giant skeletal hand and the pair of evil eyes that you saw with your demon eye are definitely not things that exist in the sacred energy formation. There is only one possibility for this sacred realm seed to be so strange, and that is that it was created by someone. The giant skeletal hand and the evil eyes are both protective measures left behind by the person who created the sacred realm seed." The Ghost Emperor's voice became very low towards the end. Even though he was a peak formation master in the sacred world, he had never heard of anyone who could create a sacred realm seed. The sacred realm seed was something that could transform a territory. The person who created the sacred realm seed could be said to have created a sacred realm. Nie Tian's expression became very ugly after hearing the Ghost Emperor's words. He was momentarily speechless. Since the Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor were sure that the sacred realm seed was created by someone, there should be no doubt. However, Nie Tian could not imagine what kind of existence could create a sacred realm seed. Nie Tian. Since this person was able to create the sacred world seed, it's easy to imagine how heaven-defying his strength is. He definitely won't allow others to lay their hands on the sacred seed, so he will definitely set up layers of protection. At this moment the Fat Cat continued, If you enter this cave, you will face unimaginable dangers. At this point, he did not continue. The fat cat and the ghost emperor were equally fearful of the person who could create the sacred realm seed. They didn't have the confidence to fight against such a terrifying existence. Fat Cat had been by Nie Tion's side for so long and had accompanied Nie Tion through countless life and death situations. Fat Cat had never been afraid. But this time, he was afraid. At this moment, Nie Tion's expression returned to normal. Suddenly, the light in his eyes flickered, and he asked, "Fatty, is there a difference between a seed nurtured by the world and a seed created by humans?" "There's no difference." The fat cat shook his head. His eyes flickered, and he felt a faint sense of unease. "If that's the case, I have to enter this cave," Nie Tion said with a plain but firm look in his eyes. The sacred world seed could help him unseal the second star mark. He urgently needed to increase his strength, so he would not give up this opportunity. "Nie Tion, you don't know the dangers behind this cave. There will be plenty of opportunities for the sacred world seed in the future. There's no need to take the risk now," the Ghost Emperor said anxiously. Before Nie Tion could speak, the fat cat sighed and said with a bitter smile, "Ghost Emperor, don't say any more. We can't change his decision." After following Nie Tion for so long, the fat cat was very familiar with Nie Tion's personality. Even if there was only a slight chance, Nie Tion would not give up. "Fat Ghost Emperor, trust me." Nie Tion nodded slightly and said with a faint smile. His eyes were surging with domineering confidence. After experiencing countless life and death situations, Nie Tion believed that he was best at creating miracles. He grasped hope in despair, and walked out of the impossible. The fat cat and the Ghost Emperor knew that Nie Tion had made up his mind, so they did not say anything else. After calming down, Nie Tion suddenly asked, "Fat, what did you mean by the demon eye weeping blood?" "Nie Tion, the demon eye weeping blood is the reawakening of the demon eye. The first extreme demon annihilation seal has already appeared on your face," the fat cat said in a deep voice, and there was a hint of worry in her voice. Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal. When Nie Tion heard this name, he suddenly felt a bloody mark on the right side of his face. It was actually burning with pain. This bloodstain was left behind after the demon eye shed tears of blood. Currently, it was on Nie Tion's face, and it was extremely eye-catching, making him look extremely evil. "Fat, is this bloody mark the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal?" Nie Tion frowned and asked with a heavy gaze. If this blood stain continued to exist, his appearance would look very strange. "TQR 1 inch yes." The fat cat nodded and said, "You don't need to worry for now. The Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal will dim down in a few days. It will only be activated under certain circumstances." "Yes." Nie Tion nodded slightly and sensed the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal. He felt an extremely strong demonic force from it. He was very familiar with this force. It was the demonic force from the Extreme Demon Embryo. The only difference was that the demonic force from the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal was darker and more terrifying. The powerful force from the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal shocked Nie Tion. But right now, he didn't know what the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal was, nor did he know how to use its power. The fat cat didn't say anything else but sighed in his heart. "Nie Tion, the pair of evil eyes you saw just now was definitely something terrifying. Or else it wouldn't have triggered the demon eye weeping blood. This time, I really don't have the slightest confidence." To be able to trigger the demon eye weeping blood and activate the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal, the power of that pair of evil eyes was unimaginable. The worry in the fat cat's heart increased again. But now, he had no other choice. He could only try his best to help Nie Tion overcome this crisis. "Nie Tion, are you okay?" Feng Qi looked at Nie Tion. Seeing that the latter didn't speak for a long time, he couldn't help but ask. "I'm fine." Nie Tion faintly smiled and his expression returned to normal. He didn't say what happened just now because he didn't want to cause chaos. And even if he did say it, nobody would believe him. In the eyes of the crowd, the person who could create the seed of the sacred world simply didn't exist. After a while, the crowd calmed down a lot. Everyone, let's go in. Qin Jingyue inhaled deeply and said in a low voice. Though they had just experienced a shocking scene, it didn't affect the crowd's excitement. After all, the temptation of the seed of the sacred world was far too great. Qin Jingyue's gaze froze. He stepped forward and was the first to enter the cave. Chapter 2983. What's going on? Everyone saw Qin Jingyue step into the cave and disappear. They couldn't help but exclaim in shock. Everyone, calm down! Kuyo Oniguchi roared. His eyes swept across the crowd and everyone quietened down. The crowd looked at the cave and many people subconsciously retreated. It was as if it wasn't a cave in front of them, but a monster that could devour everything. Nye Tian, this cave should be a space-time gate. Do you know where it leads to? At this moment, Little Fat Cat spoke, reminding Nye Tian. TQR 1 inch yes. Nye Tian nodded. The moment Qin Jingyue stepped into the cave, he felt a trace of space-time aura. There should be a space-time gate hidden in the cave. Only when a warrior stepped into it would the space-time gate release its aura. Go in. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Before the others could react, he stepped in and disappeared instantly. The crowd was stunned. They didn't expect Nye Tian to be so decisive. So it's a space-time gate. At this time, Su Chen suddenly laughed and said loudly, Everyone, don't panic. It's just a hidden space-time gate. When the crowd heard Su Chen's words, they suddenly quieted down. Everyone, follow me. Let's go in together. Su Chen confirmed the space-time gate and said loudly. He stepped into the cave. The others reacted and stepped in one after another. At the same time, in the depths of the Arctic snow mountain, in a huge ice valley, two figures stood. It was Qin Jingyue and Nye Tian. The two of them stepped into the cave and came to the ice valley in front of them. What puzzled them was that this huge ice valley was sealed off from all sides like a prison. Before the two of them could speak, a surprised voice sounded. Then a figure appeared. It was Su Chen. What is this place? Su Chen's figure landed. Perhaps it was because he panicked, but he shouted. Nye Tian turned around and glanced at him. He didn't speak. Then more people appeared. Not long after, everyone came to the ice valley. Everyone's silhouettes landed. The commotion lasted for a long time before it finally calmed down. However, the ice valley they were in was too strange. There were thick ice walls on all sides, and countless ice vortexes were floating above their heads, constantly releasing cold air into the surroundings. The entire ice valley was filled with a piercingly cold air. It was so cold that it seemed to be able to seep into one's bones. It's so cold. At this time, someone couldn't stand it anymore and couldn't help but say. Nye Tian furrowed his brows and looked at the frost vortex in the sky with a solemn expression. He had long sensed that the cold air in the air was intensifying bit by bit, and this cold air was released by the frost vortex. When they first arrived, they could barely withstand the cold. Still, after a moment, all martial artists below the level of demi-saint could no longer hold on. Many low-level half-saint martial artists were almost frozen into ice cubes. Without the protection of their companions, these low-level half-saint martial artists would have frozen to death. Master Su Chen, have we fallen into some killing formation? Dean Li Jin asked with a frown as he took a step forward to Su Chen's side. This ice valley was sealed off from all sides, and there was that terrifying frost vortex above their heads. It was clearly a killing formation. Su Chen shot a cold look at Li Jin as if he was very angry, but he didn't say anything. Dean Li, Master Su is trying to sense the killing formation. Let's not disturb him. Mu Xinghe, the patriarch of the Mu family, said calmly. At this time, most people's gazes were focused on Su Chen, hoping that the latter could find some clues. The cold air in this sealed ice valley was getting heavier and heavier. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before even a pseudo-saint would not be able to withstand the cold pressure. On the other side, Mu Shuijing came to Nie Tian's side and whispered, "Master, I can sense a trace of the aura of a formation, but why can't I confirm it?" He had already confirmed that this ice valley was indeed shrouded by a huge killing formation. However, the aura of the formation in the space was faintly discernible, making it impossible for him to accurately sense it. "Master Nie Tian, I have the same feeling as Brother Mu. This formation is very strange. No matter how I try, I can't sense the exact existence of the formation." Ku Wu also walked over and said with a frown, "This is a double formation. The killing formation is embedded with another formation. The two formations are perfectly fused together, concealing the aura of the formation." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he said calmly, "Of course, he wasn't the one who sensed the aura of the formation. He was merely repeating the words of the fat cat. A formation within a formation." Mu Shuijing's eyes trembled violently when he heard Nie Tian's words. "So that's how it is." Ku Wu was also extremely surprised. He looked at Nie Tian with undisguised admiration and thought to himself, "Master Nie Tian is indeed an unparalleled formation master. He can even sense the formation within a formation." At the same time, he glanced at Mu Shuijing and thought to himself, "Brother Mu is really lucky to be under Master Nie Tian's tutelage. I've found it." At this moment, Su Chen's voice suddenly sounded. He was very surprised as he pointed to an ice wall and said, "This is where the formation energy converges. If I'm not wrong, this is where the eye of the formation is." When everyone heard his words, they all looked over. However, they only saw an ice wall and nothing else. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he looked over. Sure enough, his demon eye saw faint magical symbols swirling around the ice wall. Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu looked over and exchanged glances. They said in shock, "Su Chen's attainments in formations are indeed very high. He actually found the eye of the formation." The two's perception was very strong. At the same time, they sensed the strong aura of the formation energy around the ice wall. This aura of the formation energy was the aura that they had been trying to ascertain but were unable to. The two then looked at Nie Tian with awkward expressions. Su Chen was one step ahead of Nie Tian and found the eye of the formation first. This was something they did not expect. However, at this moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He kept turning around to look at the surrounding ice walls, his face full of surprise. Fat Cat told him that Su Chen had only found a fake eye of the formation. On the surrounding ice walls, there were a total of 99 fake eyes. They were all used to conceal the real eye of the formation. Su Chen had spent so much time and only found one fake eye of the formation. However, Fat Cat had directly identified 99 fake eyes. The difference in their attainments in formations was obvious. "Men, attack the eye of the formation with all your might." At this moment, Su Chen pointed to the fake eye of the formation and shouted loudly. "Yes!" The surrounding people were extremely excited. They all shouted yes and wanted to step forward to help. Chapter 2984. Just as everyone was about to break the formation, Nie Tian suddenly walked over, causing everyone to be taken aback. "You bastard, what did you say?" Immediately afterwards, Su Chen snapped out of his daze and stared fixedly at Nie Tian. His eyes filled with a cold light. He hated Nie Tian so much that he couldn't wait to tear Nie Tian into 1,000 pieces, burn his bones, and scatter his ashes. Now that Nie Tian had suddenly jumped out and claimed that the spell formation core he had discovered was fake, how could he tolerate it? Everyone else looked at Nie Tian as well. Most of them were looking at him with suspicion. Though Nie Tian was Mu Shuijing's teacher, most people thought he was a joke. Arrays were much more difficult than alchemy and craft. Nie Tian was so young and there was no way he was an array master. I said this array is fake. Nie Tian stared at Su Chen and coldly said, Bullsh *t. Su Chen was completely infuriated. He cursed and growled, How can the array I sensed be fake? You are obviously afraid of losing to me and are trying to mislead everyone. As soon as he spoke, the crowd became restless. This young man sure is audacious. He dares to slander Master Su. Yeah, why doesn't he take a look at himself? I don't think he can even sense the slightest bit of the array's energy. I'm worried that Master Su will break the array and make him lose. This young man sure is evil. For a bet, he doesn't care about our lives. How despicable! Countless gazes stared at Nie Tian. Their words were vicious, and they thought of Nie Tian as a despicable person. Nie Tian frowned and his expression darkened. Based on the current situation, even if he continued to argue, no one would believe him. Nie Tian, ignore these people. Whoever wants to die, just let them die. Fat Cat's voice rose and said angrily, I'll say it one more time. This spell core is fake. If anyone wants to die, feel free to attack. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he repeated himself and retreated. Everyone looked at Nie Tian, and when they sensed the determination in his eyes, they could not help but tremble. Humph! Su Chen sneered and said to Mu Xinghe, the patriarch of the Mu clan, Patriarch Mu, please take action and break the killing array. This. Mu Xinghe's face stiffened. He let out a dry cough and said, Grandmaster Su, this formation core doesn't look strong. I don't think there's a need for me to do anything. Upon hearing Mu Xinghe's words, Su Chen's old face sank. He said in a cold tone, Patriarch Mu, are you suspecting this great master? I don't dare. Mu Xinghe frowned. He turned around and said to a warrior of the Mu clan behind him, Mu Lingshan, come and help Master Su break the array. Mu Lingshan was stunned for a moment, and his face looked terrible. At this moment, everyone could see that Mu Xinghe did not help because he was suspicious. Although Nie Tian was young, he was very strange. Everyone remembered what had happened to him before. Mu Xinghe was not sure if Nie Tian's words were true, so he did not dare to joke around with his life. Do it. Mu Xinghe looked at Mu Lingshan and said in a cold and commanding tone. Yes. Mu Lingshan's face looked terrible, but he still nodded in agreement. As a member of the Mu clan, how could he disobey the patriarch's order? Then, everyone began to disperse. Mu Lingshan stepped forward one step. His entire body's qi exploded and filled the air. TQR 1-inch boom. In the next moment, his eyes darkened and he threw out a palm. Instantly, a violent force was released like a tsunami. It exploded with a terrifying force and rushed towards the ice wall. At the same time, the ice wall seemed to have sensed something and made a strange sound. Then, many inscriptions appeared and were released. In the blink of an eye, the coldness in the air intensified. Then, a gust of cold air gushed out and condensed into a terrifying icicle in the air. It headed straight towards Mu Lingshan with murderous intent. Crack, crack, crack. In the blink of an eye, the coldness was released and surged in the air. The surrounding space was frozen. Even Mu Lingshan's attack in the air was frozen. It was as if time had been frozen. Mu Lingshan suddenly felt something was wrong. He screamed and the fear in his eyes reached its peak. In the next second, he didn't have time to react. His entire body was frozen and his face was still full of fear. This sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to shake violently. They looked at Mu Lingshan in fear. Mu Lingshan's attack was frozen in an instant. Nobody expected this. What was going on in front of him? While everyone was still in shock, the coldness in the air slowly disappeared and returned to the ice wall. Bang! Mu Lingshan's body fell to the ground. After he landed, he shattered into pieces of ice. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The fear in their hearts was at its peak. The scene was dead silent. Grandmaster Su, what is going on? After a while, a low roar was heard. A pair of eyes stared at Su Chen angrily. It was Mu Xinghe. Mu Lingshan was a member of the Mu clan and he was very strong. He was a 5th-rank pseudo-holy warrior. His position in the Mu clan wasn't low. He died just like that. How could Mu Xinghe not be angry? More importantly, he almost made a move just now. If he had made a move, the person who would have turned into ice would be him. If the dignified clan leader of the Mu clan died just like that, being laughed at would be a small matter. The Mu clan would definitely decline in the future. How is this possible? Su Chen's old face was stiff. Finally, he reacted. He was extremely shocked and his face was extremely ugly. He clearly sensed that the ice wall was where the array eye was. Why did this happen? Grandmaster Su, your array skills are a mess. Mu Xinghe's face darkened and he shouted in a low voice. He was already very patient. If someone else had caused Mu Lingshan's death, he would have made a move long ago. The gazes of the others slowly changed. They became strange, doubtful, suspicious, and even contemptuous. Su Chen, the 3rd-ranked array master in the Myriad domain, had lost all his face today. Could it be that I was wrong? Su Chen asked in shock. His eyes were trembling and he wanted to find a crack in the ice to hide in. I told you that what you sensed was a fake formation core. At this moment, Nie Tian's voice rang out and he said indifferently. His voice wasn't loud, his tone was calm, and his words were ordinary. However, every sentence and every word that fell into Su Chen's ears was like a crisp slap to his face. At this moment, everyone turned to look at Nie Tian. Their previous cold, disdainful gazes were replaced by burning adoration. Even if they weren't willing to admit that Nie Tian was an array master, everything that Nie Tian said and did was irrefutable. Su Chen, look carefully. There are a total of 99 fake array eyes in this ice wall. Nie Tian smiled faintly and waved his hand. A wave of sword essence dispersed in the air and turned into 99 swords that landed on 99 different spots on the ice wall. Chapter 2985. Su Chen sensed the locations of the 99 sword rays and froze on the spot like a block of wood. On the other side, Mu Shuijing and Ku Wu were stunned too. Their expressions were the same as Su Chen's. As for the others, they were confused as they had no idea what was going on. Apart from Su Chen, Mu Shuijing, and Ku Wu, no one else could sense the presence of the formation force. Even the other divine formation masters had no idea what the 99 sword rays meant due to their low cultivation levels. Nie Tian, what's going on? Qin Jingyue collected his thoughts and asked in a low voice as he approached Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled and said, Sir Adjudicator, I sense that there are 99 fake formation eyes in this ice valley. I'm just using the sword rays to mark out the locations of the fake formation eyes. This. Qin Jingyue was stunned for a moment before he asked in astonishment, You're saying that the locations of the sword rays are fake formation eyes? Yes. With a faint smile, Nie Tian nodded and said, In a grand spell formation, false spell formation eyes are usually used to hide the real formation eyes, and the killing intent in the false spell formation eyes is also the strongest. I see. Qin Jingyue could not help but gasp after understanding the situation. If he was the one who attacked the fake formation eyes, he would have been the one to die. Tikyur one following this, his eyes narrowed as he looked at Nie Tian and asked, Mr. Nie, there are so many fake formation eyes in this ice valley. Where are the real formation eyes? I'm looking for them. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Qin Jingyue quickly nodded and felt much more at ease. Since Nie Tian was able to accurately locate the 99 fake formation eyes, it should not be difficult for him to locate the real formation eyes. At this moment, everyone's gazes were focused on Nie Tian, their eyes surging with blazing light. Now that everyone had completely lost confidence in Su Chen, the only person who could save them was Nie Tian. Master! At that instant, a cry could be heard all of a sudden. Following this, a figure dashed toward them. Everyone was stunned, and their gazes couldn't help but tremble violently when they saw that the person that charged over was actually Su Chun. Nie Tian's expression sank when he saw Su Chun rushing toward him. Thump! Just as everyone was guessing what Su Chun was going to do, he dropped to his knees in front of Nie Tian. Everyone's expressions stiffened upon seeing this, and their faces were filled with disbelief. Who would have thought that the arrogant and conceited Su Chun would actually kneel before Nie Tian in front of so many people? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked with a faint smile, "What are you doing, Su Chun?" "Grandmaster Nie Tian, your attainments in spell formations are unparalleled," Su Chun said in a loud voice as he kowtowed to Nie Tian. "I, Su Chun, am greatly impressed." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he was amused by the scene before him. This Su Chun had been itching to kill him just a moment ago, but he was now kneeling and kowtowing to him. The change in his attitude was too ridiculous. Besides, not only was Su Chun arrogant, but his flattery skills were top-notch too. Su Chun noticed that Nie Tian kept on kowtowing on the icy ground without saying a word. His forehead had turned red and swollen. "Su Chun, are you admitting defeat?" Nie Tian frowned and finally spoke in a cold manner. "Su Chun, I'm willing to admit defeat." Su Chun lifted his head and looked at Nie Tian as he said in a serious tone, "I'll have no complaints if Master Nie Tian wants to punish me." Nie Tian let out a laugh and said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Su Chen's expression stiffened when he sensed the coldness in Nie Tian's eyes. He then said, "It's my honor to die in the hands of Master Nie Tian." Everyone watched from the side. Countless beasts were running wild in their hearts and cursing was written all over their faces. No one had expected Su Chun to do such a thing. "Su Chun, stand up." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Your life is still useful. I'll keep it for now." "Thank you, Master Nie Tian." Su Chen's eyes trembled. He then stood up and retreated to Nie Tian's side. He bowed deeply and respectfully. He was completely flabbergasted by the 99 fake spell cores that Nie Tian had found. At that moment, he knew that he was definitely no match for Nie Tian. He finally understood that Mu Shuijing's request to become Nie Tian's disciple was not a joke. He had truly become Mu Shuijing's disciple. He was even envious that Mu Shuijing could become Nie Tian's disciple. Then, the crowd slowly quietened down. Nie Tian began to search for the real array cores. As time passed, the coldness in the air became more and more intense. Nie Tian felt a bone-piercing coldness that made him feel oppressed. Many cultivators could not withstand the invasion of the coldness, and could only sit down and rely on the protection of their companions to barely catch their breath. However, as the coldness in the air intensified, everyone's expressions became more and more terrible. At this rate, it would not be long before the pseudo-sacred cultivators' lives would be threatened. "I can't take it anymore." At that moment, a roar suddenly sounded. A cultivator soared into the sky and flew toward the sky. Everyone suddenly raised their heads, their eyes trembling, and their faces pale. That cultivator had just approached a frost vortex when his body froze for a moment and was sealed in ice. He then fell and turned into ice shards when he hit the ground. The tragic scene caused everyone's expressions to stiffen. Their eyes were filled with fear. The coldness in the frost vortex was too terrifying. Even a high-level pseudo-sacred cultivator would not be able to withstand it. Moreover, there were many frost vortexes. Even an expert like Kuyo Oniguchi would die instantly if he was invaded by the coldness in the frost vortexes. Shocked, the crowd once again fixed their eyes on Nie Tian. "Found it!" At that moment, Nie Tian's eyes lit up and he shouted in joy. Upon hearing Nie Tian's voice, everyone's eyes instantly turned red and filled with burning desire as they looked at him. "The array cores are in these two places." Nie Tian's lips curled up into a faint smile as he pointed to two ice walls not far away. The killing formation in the ice valley was not only a formation within a formation, but also a killing formation with two array cores. Even Fat Cat and Ghost Emperor took a long time to set up such a complicated killing formation. Nie Tian knew that the crowd could not hold on any longer. He looked at Kuyo Anaguchi and Li Jin and said, "Deans, let's do it." Among the people present, these two were the strongest. It would be the safest if they made a move. Kuyo Anaguchi and Li Jin exchanged glances before turning to look at Nie Tian at the same time. They were obviously doubtful. They had seen with their own eyes what happened to the cultivator from the Mu family who tried to break the formation. If Nie Tian was wrong about the array cores, wouldn't the two of them die a horrible death? In particular, Kuyo Anaguchi was worried that Nie Tian would make use of the killing formation to avenge Nie Fenghua. "Kuyo Anaguchi, your life belongs to my father. I won't kill you." Nie Tian looked at Kuyo Anaguchi and said. Kuyo Anaguchi was stunned for a moment before he nodded his head. He believed that Nie Tian would not trick him. Li Jin hesitated for a moment before he finally nodded his head. The crowd dispersed while Kuyo Anaguchi and Li Jin prepared to make their move. Boom! However, at that moment, a terrifying explosion could be heard in the sky. The crowd lifted their heads and saw a frost vortex suddenly explode, as if it had been torn apart by something terrifying. Boom! In the next instant, the void trembled as a giant frost hand appeared and grabbed at the frost vortex. Chapter 2986. Frost Giant? Fat Cat's shriek made Nie Tian's face darken. He was stunned as he looked at the giant frosty hand. This wasn't the first time Nie Tian had heard about the frost giant. Back then, when he was in the frozen ruins, he had seen the profound ice dragon pillars. Each of those huge profound ice dragon pillars was more than 100,000 meters long, and there were giant dragons sealed within them. Fat Cat had said that the 12 frost dragon pillars were the frost giant's altars, and the giant dragons inside the pillars were the frost giant's food. Nie Tian was deeply shocked. He couldn't imagine how powerful the frost giant was. And now, he had actually encountered one. How could he not be shocked? But wasn't the frost giant a legendary existence? Why would it appear here? Kaboom! While Nie Tian was still in a state of shock, the giant frosty hand descended from the sky and grabbed hold of a frost vortex. However, the giant hand lifted up and tossed the frost vortex down like a snowball. Ah! This scene caused the eyes of the crowd to shake violently. Then, they began to scream in pain. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as his heart sank. He knew how terrifying the frost vortex was. If the ice vortex exploded in the crowd, the cold air would be released, and at least half of the people present would be frozen into pieces. Attack the frost vortex, don't let it fall. Nie Tian reacted in the blink of an eye. With a loud roar, he was the first to make a move, and unleashed the star heavenly slash. Kaboom! However, before his sword could get close to the frost vortex, it was frozen and shattered in the air. The frosty aura within the vortex was so terrifying that it actually froze Nie Tian's sword intent. Attack! Qin Jingyue reacted abruptly. He let out a loud roar and punched out. His fist was like a heaven-defying dragon, rushing towards the ice vortex. Boom! 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 In the next instant the others also made their moves. One after another, ferocious attacks spread towards the ice vortex like raging waves. Bang, bang, bang! In the sky, terrifying sounds of explosions rang out incessantly. The space was in a state of chaos, completely filled with wild power. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! Finally, the void suddenly trembled, and the frost vortex exploded in mid-air. The space was instantly frozen, and countless ice flowers appeared in the air. At that moment, everyone felt the frost in the air intensify. The frost was so cold that it seemed like it was going to freeze everything in the world. Nie Tian took a deep breath and activated the 9 dragon veins in his body to disperse the frost. His martial body was strong to begin with. coupled with the fact that the supreme dragon vein had a strong resistance to the cold and the chaotic flame in his body. His ability to resist the cold was even stronger than most low-level pseudosage cultivators. "Look, it's coming again." But just as everyone heaved a sigh of relief, a second frost hand appeared in the sky, directly grabbed the two frost vortexes, and fiercely smashed down. Everyone's expression changed. They were terrified. Fortunately, Qin Jingyue and the other experts were calm and attacked the two frost vortexes at the same time. Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian turned his attention away from the ice giant. He could not help much with his strength anyway. He looked at Kuyo Oniguchi and Li Jin. They had not attacked yet. "Kuyo Oniguchi, what are you waiting for? Attack!" Nie Tian roared with a dark expression. Kuyo Oniguchi and Li Jin looked at each other. Their auras surged and they were ready to attack. Boom! Boom! The next moment the two of them moved at the same time. Violent energy was released and blasted at the two formation eyes. Boom! Boom! The terrifying energy landed on the formation eyes at the same time, causing the entire ice valley to shake. Bang! Bang! Immediately, the ice walls where the two spell cores were located trembled and then exploded. Two holes appeared and cracks spread out in all directions. Crack, crack, crack. The cracks on the ice walls spread very quickly. In the blink of an eye, they covered the entire ice valley. "The grand spell formation is about to break," Nie Tian exclaimed, his eyes blazing with excitement as he looked at the cracks on the ice walls around him. "Everyone, let's attack together and destroy this killing formation." Right at this moment, Su Chen's voice sounded out, and he shouted with pleasant surprise. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone reacted and simultaneously attacked the surrounding ice walls. Immediately, the entire ice valley began to crumble. Nie Tian looked up at the sky. The two frost vortexes exploded and a terrifying chill spread in the air, freezing the space. However, at this time, the cold air was no longer a threat to them. The entire formation had already collapsed beyond recognition, and the cold air was no longer as dense as before. In the space, lines of runes circulated, but they were already broken, like fallen leaves in a gale. Boom, boom, boom. The ice walls began to collapse and the space became clear. Everyone was overjoyed. Their faces were filled with the joy of surviving a disaster. However, Nie Tian looked up at the sky with a strange expression. He realized that the pair of frost hands had disappeared. The frost vortexes were also disappearing. The way they disappeared was very strange. It was as if they had disappeared into the space. What's going on? Nie Tian was very confused and puzzled. Where did the frost giant go? Why did the frost vortexes disappear? At that moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He saw a figure flash in the sky. How is this possible? His eyes narrowed, and his expression was one of shock. He was very sure that it was not an illusion. A figure had appeared in the void but disappeared in an instant. However, he could not understand why a person would appear here. Could it be that someone had arrived before them? Or, the figure that disappeared in a flash was the person who created the seed of the sacred world? Thinking of this, Nie Tian's eyes darkened and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. If the person who created the seed of the sacred world was still alive, he would be a terrifying existence. While Nie Tian was still bewildered, the grand spell formation completely shattered. TQR1 The surrounding ice walls collapsed and disappeared. The space became vast. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. They were actually on a boundless ice field. The cold wind was like a knife and the frost was like a knife. Looking around, it was a boundless ice field. What is this place? Everyone was shocked. They broke through the killing array and came out of the ice valley. It was as if they had come from a small cage to a bigger cage. Nie Tian was also shocked. It was as if they had come to a different world. Nie Tian. At that moment, Su Chen suddenly came to Nie Tian's side. His face was filled with panic and his voice was trembling. Did you hear that voice? Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed. Chapter 2987. Hearing Fat Cat scream, Nye Tian's face darkened. Boom! At that moment, the ice surface in the distance suddenly shook, as if there was a giant beast charging at them. What is that thing? The others also noticed that something was wrong and couldn't help but cry out in horror. Boom! 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 At this moment, the surrounding ice began to shake. Then, it cracked and crumbled. It looked as if there was a huge force beneath the ice, forcefully pushing it open. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them, and they could not help but move closer to each other. Oh no, it's a single-horned ice snake. Just then, Fat Cat's voice rang out again. TQR 1-inch boom. As soon as Fat Cat's voice fell, the ice surface in the distance exploded, and a giant beast rushed out of it. Its huge body shattered the ice within a few thousand meters. Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. The giant beast was a giant snake. Its body was more than 1,000 meters long, and its body was covered with a layer of icicle-like scales. On the head of the snake, there was a giant horn that was 100 meters long. This is a single-horned ice snake, Nye Tian exclaimed in his heart. Single-horned ice snakes have been extinct since ancient times. Why would they appear here? What is this place? Fat Cat's scream rang out again, and he seemed to be in a panic. Boom! 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 At the same time, the surrounding ice surface exploded, and one after another, single-horned ice snakes appeared. They surrounded the group and charged at them in a frenzy. Nye Tian felt the aura of the single-horned ice snakes, and his face darkened. He estimated that the strength of a single-horned ice snake was comparable to a human pseudo-sage. Boom! At that moment, a single-horned ice snake charged at them, and its ferocious aura filled the air. Several weaker martial artists did not know what was going on, and they were directly turned into ice cubes. Following which, the rest of the one-horned ice snakes charged at Zhang Xian. Screams of agony filled the air. Everyone, don't panic. Stick together. Right at this moment, Qin Jingyue's voice sounded out. Everyone came to their senses, and the weak gathered around the strong. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, many pseudo-saint experts began to counterattack. Waves of violent attacks crashed into the void, blocking the first wave of attacks from the horned ice snake. Nye Tian slashed out with his sword and retreated to the middle of the crowd. He was temporarily safe. However, on the outskirts of the crowd, dozens of experts were fighting the horned ice snakes. The single-horned ice snake's body was extremely tough. Even an expert like Kuyo Oniguchi would have to go all out to kill a single-horned ice snake. With the help of Kuyo Oniguchi and the other powerhouses, everyone was relatively safe. However, Nye Tian could see that the ice in the distance was still cracking, and more horned ice snakes were charging towards them. At this rate, Kuyo Oniguchi and the others would not be able to hold on for long. What should I do? Nye Tian frowned, his brain working at top speed. Nye Tian. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded. Elder Hua. Nye Tian saw the face that suddenly appeared in front of him, and his eyes could not help but heat up. Before entering the Arctic snow mountain, Huairu had said that he had a plan to let Nye Tian obtain the sacred world seed. However, what happened next was beyond Nye Tian's expectations. He felt that Huairu would not have guessed that the sacred world seed of the Arctic snow mountain was created by someone, so Huairu's previous plan might not work. Now that Huairu had taken the initiative to look for him, he might bring him a pleasant surprise. Nye Tian, we must find the Frost Fiend altar. Huairu looked at Nye Tian and said in a deep voice. Frost Fiend altar? Nye Tian was stunned. He had no idea what Huairu was talking about. Look at this. Huairu took out a map scroll, opened it, and handed it to Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked at the map in front of him, and his eyes narrowed. He did not expect that Hua-Iru would have a map of the Arctic snow mountain. The sacred world seed is born from the Frost Fiend altar. As long as we can find the Frost Fiend altar, we can find the sacred world seed. Hua-Iru did not explain much and said hurriedly. He pointed at a bright spot on the map and said, "The location of the Frost Fiend altar is here, but I have not been able to determine where it is." Nie Tian frowned and looked at the map with a heavy gaze. To be honest, he could not understand the map at all. How could he understand a map that even Hua-Iru could not understand? Nie Tian, this is a map from the immemorial era. The location of the Frost Fiend altar should be nearby. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded in surprise. Nie Tian frowned and looked around. As far as his eyes could see, it was a boundless ice field. Where was the altar? Since the Frost Fiend altar could nurture the sacred world seed, the scale of the altar should be very large. However, the ice field was vast and boundless, and there was no sign of the altar. "Ghost Emperor, are you sure?" Nie Tian's face was gloomy as he asked in a deep voice. "Although this map is very old, it is nothing to me. I am very sure that the Frost Fiend altar is within a few tens of thousands of meters from here." The Ghost Emperor replied with absolute certainty. "This." Nie Tian frowned and his expression froze for a moment. Since the Ghost Emperor was so sure that the Frost Fiend altar was nearby, it should be right. However, there was nothing in the surroundings. This was very strange. The single-horned ice snake is an immemorial beast. Looking at the size of these single-horned ice snakes, they should be adult. Why are they so weak? At this moment, the fat cat's voice suddenly sounded. Weak? Nie Tian frowned and his face darkened. In his opinion, these single-horned ice snakes were comparable to human pseudo-sages. They were already very strong. How could the fat cat say that they were weak? Strange, why are these giant snakes getting stronger and stronger? At this moment, a martial artist suddenly shouted, his face filled with shock. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he used his divine sense to investigate. His expression became strange. He discovered that the aura of the single-horned ice snakes was indeed much stronger than before. "What's going on?" He frowned, a look of surprise on his face. "I know." Immediately, the fat cat seemed to have discovered something and shouted in surprise. "Fat, what do you know?" Nie Tian's eyes lit up as he asked anxiously. "These single-horned ice snakes have just awakened," the fat cat said excitedly. "Their strength is slowly awakening, and they will soon reach their peak state." "This?" Nie Tian's face stiffened as he asked in shock. "How strong are the single-horned ice snakes at their peak state?" "They are comparable to human pseudo-sages," the fat cat replied and then said, "but that is not important. What is important is, where did these single-horned ice snakes awaken from?" Chapter 2988. In an instant, Nie Tian understood, and his eyes blazed. The fat cat's meaning was simple. The single-horned ice serpents had just awakened, so they must have been in a frozen state before. Where would they be sealed in ice? Without a doubt, in the Frost Fiend altar. The single-horned ice serpents appeared from under the ice, so the Frost Fiend altar must be under the ice. No wonder the Ghost Emperor said the Frost Fiend altar was nearby, but Nie Tian couldn't find it. It turned out that the altar was under the ice. "Nie Tian, are you sure the Frost Fiend altar is under the ice?" Hua-Iru looked at Nie Tian and asked in surprise. "I'm sure." Nie Tian nodded heavily. However, the problem they were facing now was how to enter the ice. "Nie Tian, if this Emperor's senses aren't wrong, we're currently within the protective formation of the Frigid Fiend altar. As long as we break the formation core, the Frigid Fiend altar will naturally appear." The Ghost Emperor's voice was filled with excitement. "It's the array again." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't sense any aura of array power. "Nie Tian, this protective array is hidden between heaven and earth. Even a Saint Array Master wouldn't be able to sense any aura of array power," the Ghost Emperor said solemnly. Then what do we do? Nie Tian was stunned. Didn't this mean that even the Ghost Emperor and the Fat Cat couldn't find the array core? Nie Tian, whether we can find the array core or not depends on you, the Ghost Emperor said solemnly. Before entering here, your demonic I felt a strange aura, and you even saw a pair of evil eyes. I'm guessing that your demonic I should have a special reaction to the Frost Fiend altar. Therefore, whether we can find the array core or not depends on your demonic eye. Nie Tian's face sank and he nodded slightly. He had a lot of questions in his heart, but he could only suppress them in his heart for now. Once he left this place alive, he would naturally know everything. Right now, he had to find the array core of the altar's protective array as soon as possible. Ah! Right at this moment, a blood-curdling scream rang out, and a bloody light appeared in the air. Nie Tian followed the sound and saw a martial artist being killed by a single-horned ice serpent. That martial artist had the strength of a 5th-rank false saint, but he was killed by the single-horned ice snake. This meant that the single-horned ice snake was slowly recovering its strength. If he waited for the horned ice serpent to recover to its peak state, Nie Tian and the others would be dead. According to Fat Cat, the single-horned ice snake at its peak had the combat power of a peak false saint. Among those present, there were only a handful of peak false saint experts. However, there were tens of thousands of single-horned ice snakes in front of him. That was equivalent to tens of thousands of peak false saints. Just thinking about it was terrifying. The fact that the demonic chill altar could release so many single-horned ice serpents showed how terrifying this altar was. Next, Nie Tian focused his mind and began to use his demonic eye to sense his surroundings. However, as time slowly passed, he did not sense anything. There was nothing unusual in the surrounding space. Calm down, calm down, calm down. Nie Tian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. At this time, the more flustered he was, the more troublesome it would be. These giant serpents are getting more and more powerful. We can't stop them. At this time, a voice sounded, and then a figure rushed into the sky, wanting to leave. Nie Tian frowned and looked at the person. It was the Rong family's patriarch, Rongting. Obviously, Rongting wanted to leave the others behind and save his own life. Hiss! However, at this time, a single-horned ice serpent rushed up against the sky, opened its huge mouth, and pounced toward Rongting. Bastard, you're courting death! Rongting was very fierce. With a low roar, he directly slammed his palm down. The terrifying palm force condensed into a huge palm shadow in the air and smashed down toward the single-horned ice serpent. Boom! Boom! As the palm shadow fell, the space suddenly shook, and then the giant horn of the single-horned ice serpent was shattered. The huge body of the single-horned ice serpent trembled and directly fell. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly saw a black light appear on the belly of the single-horned ice serpent. This discovery caused him to frown involuntarily. The array core is on the body of the single-horned ice serpent. In the next moment, he suddenly understood and shouted in surprise. The moment the black light appeared on the belly of the single-horned ice serpent, Nie Tian faintly felt a trace of array energy fluctuation. He immediately confirmed that the array core was on the body of the single-horned ice serpent. The person who designed the array was very smart. He hid the array core on the body of the single-horned ice serpent, which was equivalent to the array core being mobile. This made it harder to find. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian came to a realization and praised himself excitedly. I'm a genius! However, at this time, more single-horned ice serpents appeared in the air, and all of them attacked Rongting. Nie Tian did not care about Rongting. Instead, he quickly observed each of the single-horned ice serpents. His demon eye swept across, and the black light in each of the single-horned ice serpents was very obvious. TQR1 soon, he confirmed that this was a smaller single-horned ice serpent. The black light in its body was very obvious, and its aura was much stronger than the other serpents. That's it. Nie Tian stared at the single-horned ice serpent and shouted with a burning gaze. Boom! In the next moment, the corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. Then, he stabbed out with his sword. The sword ray was like an arrow released from a bow, enveloping the ice serpent. Of course, this sword was not meant to kill the ice serpent, but to leave a mark on its body. The sword shadow fell, and the sword ray surged. A surge of sword intent lingered on the ice serpent for a moment before disappearing. When the others saw this, they were puzzled, not knowing what Nie Tian was doing. Nie Tian knew that his strength was limited and that he could not kill the ice serpent, so he shouted, "Lord Adjudicator, this ice serpent is the array core. Kill it." Okay. Qin Jingyue's eyes lit up as he reacted. He stamped his foot and rushed toward the ice serpent. At this moment, the surrounding single-horned ice serpents reacted. More than a dozen of them moved at the same time, charging toward Qin Jingyue. Cover the Adjudicator. At the same time, Kuyo Oniguchi and Li Jin's voices rang out at the same time. The two of them attacked at the same time, and the rolling waves of energy crashed into the space and blocked the dozen ice serpents. Die. In the next moment, Qin Jingyue slammed his palm down in midair, causing the void to tremble. Suddenly, a palm shadow appeared, suppressing the ice serpent with earth-shattering force. Boom! The palm shadow fell, and before the array ice snake could react, it was hit directly. Its huge body suddenly trembled, and then collapsed. Nie Tian saw the black light in the ice serpent's body turn into black runes that were instantly torn apart and dissipated into the air. Bam! 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 As the ice serpent was killed, the other single-horned ice serpents began to explode in the air. These single-horned ice serpents were array runes. The black light in their bodies was formed by the array runes. When the ice serpent was killed, the protective array collapsed. Naturally, the ice serpent could not survive and shattered in the air. When the crowd saw this, they could not help but be stunned. They had no idea what had happened. Rumble! At this moment, the ice on the ground shook violently and began to shatter on a large scale. Chapter 2989. Nie Tian looked up into the sky, only to see a pair of giant frost hands appearing as far as his eyes could see. A frost giant! His eyes trembled in an instant as he exclaimed in his mind. That pair of giant frost hands was none other than the ones that had appeared in the Ice Valley Killing Formation before, the hands of a frost giant. It was only then that Nie Tian could clearly see the pair of giant frost hands. To be precise, it was not a pair of real hands, but merely the shadow of a pair of giant hands. What was even more bizarre was that there was only the shadow of the giant hands, as if a colossal body was hidden behind them. Is that really a frost giant? Nie Tian could not help but wonder. Boom! At that very moment, the pair of giant frost hands suddenly pressed down, and an endless chill spread out as countless ice blades appeared in the air. Everyone's expression changed as they saw the scene, and they were extremely shocked. At the same time, the ice surface below was collapsing as if there was a bottomless abyss below. Everyone, run down! Nie Tian reacted quickly and yelled. His body moved as astral soul wings appeared on his back, and he dove down. Bang, bang, bang! However, many martial artists who did not react in time were directly frozen by the giant frost hands and turned into ice shards in the air. Nie Tian's figure fell, and the space around him was filled with ice blades. He activated the Astral Soul shield and barely managed to protect himself. Some of the weaker martial artists were instantly killed by the ice blades that filled the sky. Nie Tian was worried about Hua Iru's safety, but his expression froze when he saw the latter. Flames were raging around Hua Iru's body, and the ice blades around him could not even get close to him. What was even more bizarre was that Hua Iru's strength was no longer that of a first-stage demi-saint, but that of a ninth-stage demi-saint. How is that possible? Nie Tian was stunned by the scene before him, and his face was filled with disbelief. What did Huairu do to suddenly turn from a first-stage demi-saint to a ninth-stage demi-saint? Could Huairu have been hiding his strength all along? Boom! Just as Nie Tian was in a state of shock, the aura of the giant frost hand in the sky suddenly surged. Space itself became extremely heavy, as if it was about to be frozen by the cold qi. Oh no! Nie Tian's expression changed, and he cursed inwardly. If the space was frozen, everyone would be frozen. Then, when the giant frost hand fell, everyone would be instantly killed. I'll take this palm. The corner of Huairu's mouth twitched. Then, he suddenly soared into the sky. The flames on his body became violent in an instant, forming a sea of fire in the sky. Elder Hua. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but cry out in shock. He had never imagined that Huairu would actually take the profound ice giant's palm head-on. The power of this palm was even stronger than the giant skeletal hand that Nie Tian and the others had encountered in the huge cave. Could Huairu withstand it? Huh! Kuyo Oniguchi was also stunned by Huairu's action, and his face was filled with shock and horror. Of course, he knew Huairu, but he absolutely didn't expect Huairu's strength to be so strong. Judging from the aura alone, Huairu was even stronger than him. He had long noticed that Huairu and Nie Tian had an unusual relationship. He was very curious about Huairu's relationship with Nie Tian. At this moment, the strength that Huairu had displayed shocked him, made him wary, and even made him feel fear. He had a vague premonition that Nie Tian must have an extremely terrifying identity. When the others saw Huairu rushing over, their eyes trembled, and they were extremely shocked. Boom! At this moment, the giant frost hand fell, landing on the sea of fire around Huairu. The space around him shook, as if it was about to be torn apart in an instant. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, wild waves surged high up in the sky, and terrifying power surged in all directions. The cold air and the flames clashed, causing the entire sky and earth to groan. Seeing this scene, everyone's eyes trembled violently, and their faces were filled with indescribable shock. Huairu actually blocked the mystic ice giant's palm. Bang! However, at this moment, a dull sound was heard, and Huairu's figure swayed for a moment before directly falling from the sky. Elder Hua! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he screamed in shock. Following this, he rushed over, and all the strength in his body surged, and he steadily supported Huairu. The two figures slowly descended and stood in midair. Elder Hua, are you all right? Nie Tian looked at Huairu and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Huairu let out a deep breath, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but he laughed and said, This mystic ice giant's soul is indeed powerful. Nie Tian's brow furrowed, and his expression stiffened. He originally thought that the giant frost hand in the sky was the real mystic ice giant. TQR 1-inch The mystic ice giant is a primordial great saint. If it was the real mystic ice giant, how could I possibly block this palm? Huairu said with a faint smile, knowing what Nie Tian was thinking. Elder Hua, what is going on? Nie Tian frowned and asked in a deep voice. Don't worry, you'll find out soon. Huairu smiled and then looked up into the sky. At this moment, everyone also calmed down, and one by one, they looked up into the sky. The turbid waves in the sky slowly dissipated, and a huge altar appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, everyone was in an incomparably huge abyss, and the huge altar was suspended in midair. The altar was tens of thousands of meters wide, and the outermost layer was surrounded by 12 huge ice pillars, and in the middle of the ice pillars was a huge platform. The huge platform extended out of the abyss, like a giant hand reaching into the sky. And above the platform there was a huge whirlpool with a radius of a few thousand meters. The whirlpool was extremely fast, and it continuously released the aura of saint energy in all directions. The seed of the sacred world. Seeing the huge whirlpool, everyone immediately understood that it was the seed of the sacred world. Hua-Iru was right. The seed of the sacred world was nurtured by the cold fiend altar before them. Nye Tian, look outside the altar. Just as Nye Tian was in shock, Hua-Iru's voice was heard. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and then he immediately widened his vision, and his expression immediately froze. Outside the altar, there was an incomparably huge shadow shrouding it. This shadow was the mystic ice giant. The cold fiend altar was actually inside the body of the mystic ice giant. The cold fiend altar was tens of thousands of meters wide, but it was shrouded by the mystic ice giant. One could imagine the size of the mystic ice giant's body. The soul of the mystic ice giant. This is the last defense of the cold fiend altar. Hua-Iru's expression was very calm, and he said with a faint smile, as long as the soul of the mystic ice giant was destroyed, the seed of the sacred world would be exposed. However, the soul of the mystic ice giant was so powerful, how could they destroy it? I didn't expect that you would actually be able to find the cold fiend altar. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in the sky. It was calm and extremely real. Immediately, a figure appeared on the platform of the cold fiend altar. Chapter 2990. A figure suddenly appeared on the Tao platform of the frigid fiend altar, causing everyone's eyes to shudder violently, and their expressions to turn sluggish. Who would have thought that someone could directly enter the fiendish frost altar? Hua-Iru's eyes narrowed when he saw the figure on the altar. It was obvious that he had not expected someone to appear on the fiendish frost altar. At this moment, Nye Tian frowned and exclaimed, "It's that guy." He then looked at the figure. Previously, in the Ice Valley killing formation, the pair of frost hands had appeared, and a figure had disappeared in a flash. Nye Tian had noticed the figure at that time. He had even guessed that the figure was most likely the creator of the sacred world seed. At this moment, the figure unexpectedly appeared again. However, in the next moment, Nye Tian's expression froze as soon as he saw the face of the figure. The face belonged to someone he was familiar with. "Nye Tian, you shouldn't have come." At this moment, the figure on the altar spoke. His eyes were emotionless as he looked at Nye Tian coldly and called out his name. "How could it be you?" Nye Tian's expression stiffened for a few seconds before he finally reacted. He called out a name with a trembling voice, "Emo. Emo." Nye Tian would never have thought that the person standing on the platform at this moment would be Emo, a member of the frigid ghost wings whom he had once saved. "Take your 1-inch Nye Tian, I also didn't expect you to come here," Emo said with a cold expression. He said again, "You shouldn't have come." His coldness was not oppressive at all. Instead, it was a kind of emotionless indifference. At this moment, everyone else was flabbergasted, their eyes flickering between Nye Tian and Emo. Who would have thought that Nye Tian would know the person who had suddenly appeared on the altar? After a while, Nye Tian finally calmed down and asked, "Emo, why are you here?" He remembered that the last time he and Emo separated, the latter had clearly taken Nye Qingwan to the 4 strange regions. Why did he appear here? "Nye Tian, you don't know yet, do you? The Arctic Snow Mountain is the ancestral land of the Fiend Wings race." Emo said coldly, "The altar you are looking at right now was left behind by the ancestors of the Baleful Wings clan. This sacred world seed was nurtured from the fiendish frost altar." Nye Tian's face stiffened when he heard Emo's words. He was speechless for a long time. How could he have imagined that the Arctic Snow Mountain was the ancestral land of the Fiend Wings race? He. At this moment, Hua-Iru suddenly laughed. He shook his head and said, "No wonder the baleful frost altar just had to give birth to a saint's world at a time like this after not producing a saint's world seed in the past few million years. So the people of the baleful frost wing clan have appeared." With that, he looked at Emo and said, "If I've guessed correctly, it was you who activated the fiendish ice altar, which allowed the saint's world seed to appear." "Yes." Emo did not deny it. He nodded slightly and said, I didn't think that when the Saint's World Seed appeared, there would be such a huge fluctuation of Saint power. It actually alarmed the entire Sacred Soul region. Huairu was right. It was Emo who activated the fiendish ice altar, which was why the Saint's World Seed was born. Emo's previous trip to the 4 strange regions was actually to prepare for the activation of the fiendish ice altar and search for something. I know that the fiendish ice altar is protected by the profound ice giant's soul, but I didn't think that a member of the Baleful Wings race would appear. Huairu sighed and couldn't help but shake his head. Huairu had long been paying attention to the Arctic snow mountain. Before he found Nyetian, he had already begun to look for something that could unlock the Star Mark Dark Seal. That was why he could arrange for Nyetian to obtain the heavenly meteorite stone. He had long known that the fiendish ice altar in the Arctic snow mountain could breed a Saint's World Seed. He had been waiting for so many years, but he didn't think that a member of the Baleful Wings race would appear. The Baleful Wings race was a true descendant of the sacred race. Huairu was very familiar with the fiendish ice altar and had already thought of how to break through the profound ice giant's soul. However, Emo's appearance had exceeded his expectations. His understanding of the fiendish ice altar was obviously not deeper than Emo's. Moreover, as a member of the Baleful Wings race, how could Emo allow someone else to obtain the Saint's World Seed? I'm also very surprised that you were able to come here. Emo spoke coldly and then said, but that's not important. Whether you appear or not doesn't affect me. Is that so? Huairu frowned and then laughed. You want to use the Saint's World Seed to activate the fiendish ice blood scroll, right? Emo's expression changed when he heard Huairu's words. He didn't think that Huairu would know about the fiendish ice blood scroll. The fiendish ice blood scroll was the Baleful Wings race's holy book. It recorded the Baleful Wings race's greatest secret. Emo activated the fiendish ice altar to use the Saint's World Seed to unlock the seal on the fiendish ice blood scroll. He wanted to revive the Baleful Wings race, and activating the fiendish ice blood scroll was the first step. The fiendish ice blood scroll is a taboo book in the sacred world. Do you know the power that seals the fiendish ice blood scroll? Huairu looked at Emo and asked. I know what the price is. I don't need you to remind me. Emo replied coldly as he looked at Huairu. The fiendish ice blood scroll is sealed by the polar ice seal. Once it is activated, the power of the polar ice seal will be released. When that happens, the entire sacred soul realm will be frozen by the polar ice seal. Everyone below the half-sage will die. Huairu looked at Emo and said solemnly, have you really thought about this price? The polar ice seal was a sage-level seal. Its power was beyond imagination. It could freeze the entire sacred soul realm in an instant. Moreover, everyone below the half-sage in the sacred soul realm could not withstand the impact of the polar ice seal and would die instantly. There were definitely hundreds of billions of people below the half-sage in the sacred soul realm. The price that Emo had to pay for activating the fiendish ice blood scroll was hundreds of billions of lives. Do you want to stop me? Emo's eyes darkened as he asked in a cold tone. What do you think? Huairu's face darkened slightly, but his gaze was firm. Even if it wasn't for the sacred world seed, he couldn't let Emo kill hundreds of billions of people. With just you guys? Emo's face darkened and he said coldly, you can't even break the profound ice giant's soul. What right do you have to stop me? He had to activate the fiendish ice blood scroll no matter what price he had to pay. The fiendish ice altar was protected by the profound ice giant's soul. He believed that aside from a true sage, no one could break the profound ice giant's soul. If you only rely on the profound ice giant's soul, then I can tell you that you can't activate the fiendish ice blood scroll. Huairu smiled faintly, but his eyes were filled with cold intent. Emo looked at Huairu and couldn't help but sneer. Do you think you can break the profound ice giant's soul just because you blocked a palm strike from the profound ice giant's soul? Do you think I've used my true strength? Huairu also smiled, then looked at Nie Tian and said indifferently, Nie Tian, I want to borrow your Hellfire Crucible. Hellfire Crucible? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. The Hellfire Crucible was something that existed in the third layer of the galaxy. Previously, the number 1 emissary, Li Guangqin, had said that the heaven-shrouding totem was his original spirit, and that he had used it before. Chapter 29:91. When Nie Tian heard Huairu mention the Hellfire Crucible, he couldn't help but stare in shock. He immediately thought of the number 1 emissary, Li Guangqin, and guessed that the Hellfire Crucible might be Huairu's nascent spirit. Then he recalled the flames that Hua Xian had unleashed when he'd fought the soul of the profound frost giant. That aura was very similar to the astral sacred flame in the Hellfire Crucible. However, the flame aura that Huairu had released was far stronger than the astral sacred flame. When everyone heard Huairu's words, they couldn't help but stare at him in astonishment. Huairu had blocked the palm strike of the profound frost giant, and the power he'd unleashed had been astonishing. But Huairu had said that he hadn't used his true strength. Could it be that Huairu was hiding even more power? The battle prowess that Huairu had just displayed surpassed that of a pseudo-saint expert. If he was hiding his true strength, didn't that mean that he was already on the level of a sage? But how was that possible? Huairu didn't have the slightest bit of the aura of a sage. You think you can fight the soul of the profound frost giant? Dream on. Emo looked at Huairu and sneered, thinking that the latter was bluffing. Of course, the soul of the profound frost giant couldn't compare to the true profound frost giant, but its battle prowess was definitely comparable to that of a sage. Emo didn't believe that there was anyone in the Realmverse who could fight the soul of the profound frost giant head-on. Is that so? Huairu chuckled, then looked at Nie Tian and nodded. Nie Tian's eyes flickered and then he trembled. Immense astral power surged out of him, condensing into an enormous cauldron that glittered with starlight. This is... When everyone saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but shake violently, and they were extremely shocked. No one could have imagined that Nie Tian had hidden such power inside of him. The Hellfire Crucible hovered in midair, emanating a vast astral aura. It was ancient and majestic, like a god guarding heaven and earth. The Hellfire Crucible protects all hells, and suppresses all demons and devils. When Huairu saw the Hellfire Crucible, his eyes trembled, and his expression turned solemn. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Huairu's words. He was now convinced that the Hellfire Crucible was Huairu's nascent spirit. The fact that the Hellfire Crucible had appeared in the third galaxy made it obvious who Huairu was, the third emissary of the starry skies. Huairu waved his hand, causing the Hellfire Crucible to tremble, transforming into countless motes of starlight that shot into him. Boom! And at this moment, a terrifying aura burst forth from his body, rippling through the void, boundless and majestic. So strong! Everyone was shocked by Huairu's aura. Even Kuyo Oniguchi and the others were shocked beyond belief. The aura released by Huairu far surpassed that of a pseudo-sanctuary pinnacle expert. In fact, even an expert like Kuyo Oniguchi could feel a great sense of oppression. But right now, Huairu's strength was still at rank 9 pseudo-sage. It was extremely strange. It was hard to imagine that a pseudo-sacred 9th order cultivator would be able to unleash such a terrifying aura. It seems that I've underestimated you. Emo stood on the Dao platform, looking at Huairu with a gloomy expression. But I still doubt that you'll be able to break through the protection of the profound ice giant's soul. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the ice giant's silhouette shook violently. A boundless and boundless chi dispersed in the air. It was incomparably terrifying, forcing everyone to continuously retreat. Huairu's mouth curved into a smile. You'll know once you try, he said. Then, his silhouette moved. Terrifying black flames appeared behind him and spread into a sea of fire. It was abnormally violent. Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Previously, when he used the Hellfire Crucible, he had released Starry Sacred Flame, a 7-colored flame. But now, Huairu was releasing black flames. It was very strange. Furthermore, the black flames around Huairu were terrifying, dark and violent, as if they could burn and devour everything in their path. Tian, what I'm using is the true power of fire contained in the Hellfire Crucible, the Hellfire Demon. Huairu's voice reverberated in the void. The Hellfire Crucible protects hell and suppresses all demons and devils. It's all thanks to the Hellfire Demon. Boom. At the same time, the Hellfire Demon around him became even more violent. It condensed into countless demonic flame serpents in the air, which directly rushed towards the profound ice giant's soul. Everyone's eyes trembled when they saw this. Huairu's strength was just too strong. It was beyond everyone's imagination. Countless demonic flame serpents soared into the sky. Their aura was terrifying, and the entire space was filled with a strange aura. It was as if hell had descended. Is that all you've got? Emo smiled coldly in the face of Huairu's powerful attack. His eyes were cold. How disappointing. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, the profound ice giant's soul moved. It clenched its frost hand into a fist and punched down. Crack, crack, crack. The frost fist froze the space in its path, and the frost aura in the void became even stronger. Boom. In the next moment, cold air filled the air, and powerful energy fluctuations appeared in the air. Wherever the frost fist landed, countless demonic flame serpents were directly smashed to pieces. TQR1 immediately, the Hell Demon Flame's heaven-devouring aura was forcefully suppressed. Huairu's figure was hit by the impact, and he retreated again and again. After he stabilized himself, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his face was extremely pale. Elder Hua. Tian couldn't help but cry out when he saw this. He was worried for Huairu. Even if Huairu's current combat strength was extraordinary, and he could almost fight a sage, it was still a bit difficult for him to face the profound ice giant's soul head-on. I'm fine. Huairu glanced at Tian, and there was no fear on his face. There was only a faint smile on his face. At this moment there was only one belief in his heart, and that was to destroy the profound ice giant's soul so that Tian could obtain the sacred world seed. For this belief, he was willing to pay any price. You want to fight the profound ice giant's soul with such strength? What a joke. Emo looked at Huairu and smiled coldly, his eyes cold. Joke. Huairu responded cold and said loudly, I'm afraid you won't have the last laugh. Whoosh. In the next moment, his body shook and blood gushed out. It turned into a violent blood chi in the air, and it fused with the hellfire outside his body. Elder Hua. Tian's eyes narrowed, and his face immediately darkened. He didn't expect Huairu to burn his blood chi. Boom! The violent blood chi stimulated the powerful power of the hellfire, and the demonic flames collided in the air. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 2992. Boom! The moment the demonic flame armor appeared on Huairu's body, a violent aura shot up into the sky. The terrifying aura permeated the space, as if to suppress everything. Too terrifying! Seeing this scene, the crowd trembled even more violently. They could not help but retreat again. Huairu's aura was too strong. Anyone within 10,000 meters of him would be instantly devoured by the demonic flame of hell around him. Huh! Emo looked at Huairu, his eyes darkening as he exclaimed. He had to admit that he had underestimated Huairu. How could he have imagined that there was such a terrifying existence in the realm? At this moment, the aura that Huairu revealed was enough to pose a threat to the profound ice giant's soul. Little brat from the demonic ice-winged race, can you withstand the roar of hell? Hua Huan laughed wildly, his aura skyrocketing once again. The violent demonic flame wreaked havoc in the space, as if the world was about to be torn apart. It's too early for you to laugh. Emo's eyes darkened. With a low roar, the profound ice giant's soul moved. A terrifying fist of ice descended, blasting towards Huahuan. Huairu was not afraid at all. The demonic god armor on his body clenched into a fist and punched out. This punch was the result of burning his own blood chi and activating the power of the demonic flame of hell. The power contained in this punch was unimaginable. Even a true sage would be fearful of such a terrifying punch. Boom! In the next moment, the two huge fists collided. A terrible rumbling sound came from the void. Waves of terrifying power surged in an instant, as if the space was about to collapse. Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes were filled with extreme fear, as if they could not believe their eyes. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying waves filled the sky, and the surrounding space became chaotic. This was a confrontation between ice and fire. Two extremely opposing forces collided, devoured, and annihilated each other. Following that, the profound ice giant's soul and the demonic god armor fought even more fiercely. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, ice and demonic flame continuously collided. The battle between the two giants was simple and violent. Then, it was a pure collision of power. The crowd looked up at the sky, completely dumbfounded. Tian didn't dare to get too close. His eyes were fixed on Huairu, and he saw that the latter's body was swaying violently from side to side under the violent impact, as if it could fall at any moment. The profound ice giant's soul also suffered the same impact. Its huge body swayed in the void, seemingly on the verge of collapsing. Madman! Emo stood on the Dao platform with an ugly expression. He roared like a madman. He hadn't expected Huairu to be so terrifying. He didn't fear the profound ice giant's soul at all. We can't wait any longer. If we continue fighting like this, the soul of the profound ice giant will perish together with this person. Emo frowned and said solemnly, "It's time to end this battle. I'll let you experience the true power of the profound ice giant's soul." As his voice fell, a huge ice sword appeared in the hand of the profound ice giant's soul. It was at least 10,000 meters long and seemed to contain the power to split the heavens and earth. At this moment, the aura of the profound ice giant's soul soared, and the frigid air in the void became abnormally strong. Tian and the others could feel the terrible pressure of the frigid air from hundreds of thousands of meters away. If Huairu wasn't fighting in the sky, the pressure of the frigid air would be enough to kill everyone in an instant. Oh no! Tian frowned, looking very worried. The power of the profound ice giant's soul had increased. At this moment, it had the strength to crush Huairu. If Huairu didn't have a stronger trump card, he would most likely be killed by the soul of the profound ice giant. "Why are you in such a hurry? It seems that I'll have to use my strongest move." At this time, Huairu's voice rang out in the air. There was no fear in his voice. Instead, he was filled with fighting spirit. In the next moment, his body surged with even more terrifying hellish flames. His whole body was like an erupting volcano. Immediately, the Hellfire Crucible appeared behind Huairu, and the demon god armor appeared. He reached into the Hellfire Crucible and pulled out a huge blade made of hellish flames. When Tian saw this scene, he was completely shocked and didn't know what to say. Although the Hellfire Crucible had appeared in the Starry River, Tian didn't know much about it. Kill! But at this moment, Emo's expression darkened. With a low roar, the profound ice giant's soul slashed down. A huge sword of ice descended on Huairu like a collapsing mountain. Demonic blade of hell, one blade to destroy the world. At the same time, Huabing roared and slashed at the void with the devil blade of hell. A huge blade shadow appeared, and the endless devil flame of hell went berserk in an instant, bursting with terrifying power. Bang! In the next instant, the ice sword collided with the demonic saber, and a thunderous explosion rang out. Following that, a boundless, violent shock wave appeared, spreading in all directions. High up in the sky there was chaos, and Hua Iru's figure was completely submerged. Boom, boom, boom. Endless sounds of explosions rang out. Waves of violent waves wreaked havoc in the space. Bang. Following that, the ice sword and demonic saber shook at the same time, and then collapsed. Endless devil flame and frigid chi collided, and the world seemed to boil over. But in the next moment, Nye Tian saw Hua Iru's figure reappear, but the devil god armor around him was gone. It had been destroyed by the violent force. Hua Iru was in a very sorry state, and he was forced to retreat. TQR1 After a long time, the violent waves in the sky finally disappeared. Everyone looked up into the sky and saw that the profound ice giant's soul outside the altar had disappeared. Hua Iru had really destroyed the profound ice giant's soul. Senior Hua. Nye Tian's eyes lit up with joy, and he flew over to Hua Bing. I'm fine. Hua Iru barely managed to stabilize himself. Although he said he was fine, his body was trembling, and it seemed like even standing in the air was difficult for him. Nye Tian hurriedly used the power of the Earthstring source to help Hua Iru stabilize his aura. Only now did he realize how serious Hua Iru's injuries were. Hua Iru's 9 yuan meridians had been severely damaged, and his martial arts foundation had definitely been greatly damaged. Hua Iru had paid a huge price in the battle with the profound ice giant's soul. But in the end, he had still succeeded in destroying the profound ice giant's soul. Impossible! And at this moment, on the altar, a mournful howl sounded. Emo's body was trembling, and his face was hideous and terrifying, as if he had gone mad. He never dreamed that the profound ice giant's soul would be destroyed just like that. Emo, give up. Nye Tian looked at Emo and said in a low voice, "Don't even think about it." Emo roared, and his eyes released an incomparably cold light. He shouted, "All of you will die." Chapter 2993. Whoosh! High up in the sky, the frigid altar unleashed a terrifying restrictive force that engulfed everyone. At that moment, everyone felt their chests tighten as if they were about to suffocate. Everyone's faces stiffened. They did not expect the restrictive force released by the altar to be so terrifying. "Everyone, get into the altar!" Huarue shouted at the top of his lungs. Nye Tian came to his senses. His astral soul wings appeared on his back as he swept Hua Iru up and rushed toward the altar. Pfft! Immediately, his figure collided with the restrictive force. His body trembled a little as he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he still managed to break through the restriction. He took a step out and landed on a huge ice pillar on the altar. Everyone below came to their senses and rushed over. The restrictive force was strong, but it was not fatal. Most of them managed to break through the restrictive force and entered the altar. However, all of them were injured. Even Kuyo Oniguchi and the others were injured by the restrictive force. Obviously, the restrictive force was a force that had the ability to sense things. The stronger the martial artist was, the stronger the impact of the restrictive force would be. Humph! Emo sneered when he saw that everyone had entered the altar. He said in a deep voice, "Entering the frigid altar is tantamount to suicide. A mere first-level demi-saint. How arrogant!" At that moment a wild laughter was heard. Then, a figure shot up into the sky and charged at Emo, Mu clan leader. Everyone's eyes narrowed as they saw that figure. It was Mu Xinghe, the leader of the Mu clan. Mu Xinghe had the strength of a 9th-level demi-saint, but his aura was not strong at the moment. It was as if he had been greatly suppressed. Courting death. Emo's eyes flickered as he uttered those two words coldly. Whoosh! Then, a frigid blade condensed from frigid chi appeared. It was extremely sharp and whistled through the air, heading straight for Mu Xinghe. Mu Xinghe, who was in mid-air, suddenly sensed that something was wrong. His eyes trembled as he cried out in shock. At that moment, he realized that his strength had been suppressed and he could not unleash it at all. Pooh! In the next moment, before he could even react, the cold blade pierced through his chest. His body trembled, and he fell to the ground. Lord Patriarch! A Mu family cultivator cried out in alarm when he saw this. His figure flew over and caught Mu Xinghe. Mu Xinghe stabilized his body. Half of his body was instantly dyed red with blood, and his face was as pale as paper. At the moment of life and death, he moved slightly to the side. Otherwise, he would be killed by the cold blade. When the others saw this scene, their faces were very ugly. Mu Xinghe's strength was definitely at the peak among them. However, he couldn't even withstand a single blow. How could the crowd not be shocked? Humph! Since you've entered the baleful cold altar, you'll be suppressed by the altar's restrictions. Even if you're a sage, you won't be able to bring forth the strength of a half-sage. Right at this moment, Emo's cold voice resounded. Everyone's expression changed. They immediately sensed the martial body, and were even more shocked. The power of the restriction in the altar was too strong, and it actually suppressed everyone's strength to below the half-saint realm. On the other hand, Emo was a first-level demi-saint. Moreover, his strength was obviously not suppressed. In fact, it seemed that it had increased by quite a bit. He was a member of the Baleful Cold Wings. Naturally, he wouldn't be suppressed by the Baleful Cold Altar. This is bad. Everyone's expression trembled. Many people began to scream. At this time, even if all of them were tied together, they still wouldn't be a match for Emo. By entering the Baleful Cold Altar, they seemed to have walked right into a trap. Nye Tian, I've said it before. You shouldn't have come. At this time, Emo looked at Nye Tian. His eyes were filled with a sharp, cold light as he said, "How about now? Even if you break the profound ice giant's soul, you still won't be able to stop me. Even if I don't kill you, you'll still be slowly tortured to death by the power of the altar's restrictions." As he said this, he shook his head. A look of pity appeared on his face as he said to Nye Tian, "You once saved my life. I don't want to kill you, but you shouldn't have stopped me. You shouldn't have stood in my way. I hope you'll still be alive when I activate the baleful cold blood scroll." After saying this, he no longer looked at Nye Tian. He really didn't want to kill Nye Tian, but if Nye Tian wanted to stop him from activating the baleful cold blood scroll, he would still kill him. Making the baleful cold wings rise was his mission. Activating the baleful cold blood scroll was the first step to completing his mission. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. "Emo, are you going to kill so many innocent people from the sacred soul realm just to activate the baleful cold blood scroll?" Nye Tian looked at Emo and said in a deep voice, "I don't want to kill people, but I have to do it for the baleful cold wings." Emo growled. He couldn't hide the pain on his face. He wasn't a homicidal maniac, but he would do anything to revive the baleful cold wings. "Bastard!" Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he roared. In order to revive the baleful cold wings, Emo had become insane. However, Emo no longer paid any attention to Nye Tian. With a single movement, he made his way towards the Saint's World Seed on the platform. Next, he was going to use the Sacred World Seed to activate the baleful cold blood scroll. At that moment, everyone could clearly feel that the power of the restriction in the altar was getting stronger. If the power of the restriction kept getting stronger, everyone would be pressured to death. Everyone raised their heads to look at the sky, their eyes filled with shock. At that moment, no one dared to attack Emo anymore. It seemed like they could only watch Emo activate the baleful cold blood scroll. In the sky, Emo looked at the Sacred World Seed fervently, as if he could already see the bright future of the baleful cold wings. TQR1 then, he opened his palm, and a blood-colored vortex appeared in his palm. Crimson halos kept surging out of the vortex. Soon, the crimson halos in the sky gathered together and formed a huge blood-colored book. The blood-colored book was the baleful cold wings' most sacred item, the baleful cold blood scroll. As soon as the baleful cold blood scroll appeared, a blood-colored light appeared and instantly filled the altar. At that moment everyone felt their chests sink. The extremely heavy pressure made them suffocate. Ancestors of the baleful cold wings, please bless me and activate the baleful cold blood scroll. Emo held the baleful cold blood scroll with a solemn expression and slowly sent it into the sacred world seed. At that moment, Nietion's demon eye suddenly trembled. He saw a pair of cold, evil eyes appear on the baleful cold blood scroll. It's that pair of evil eyes! The sudden scene made Nietion's expression change, and he cried out. Previously, he had seen a pair of evil eyes. It was this pair of evil eyes that made his demon eye cry blood and caused the extreme demon destruction mark to appear on his face. Chapter 2994. Nietion looked at the pair of evil eyes again, and his expression changed to one of shock. At that moment, he felt the extreme demon destructive seal on his face was reacting to it, and it started to burn painfully. Then, the extreme demon destructive seal started to sink downwards like a sharp blade, leaving a bloody scar on Nietion's face. Then, the scar became deeper and deeper and fresh blood started to flow out, dyeing half of Nietion's face red. What's going on? Nietion endured the pain and frowned. Nietion, are you alright? Huairu looked at Nietion's bloody face and couldn't help but feel nervous. He didn't know what the extreme demon destructive seal was, but he felt a strong and dark force from it. It was terrifying. The others snapped out of their daze and stared at Nietion, their faces filled with fear. I don't know either. Nietion shook his head. He knew nothing about the extreme demon destructive seal either. Oh no! At this time, Little Fat Cat's shocked cry rang out. The extreme demon annihilation seal and the blood frost demon scroll seemed to have some sort of terrifying connection. If the blood frost demon scroll is activated, the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal will be instantly released. Fat Cat was well aware of how powerful the extreme demon destructive seal was. Even if there was only one extreme demon destructive seal on Nietion's face, once the seal's power was released, not only would Nietion not be able to withstand it, everyone present would also be buried with him. Nietion, you must stop that guy. The blood frost scroll must not be activated. Fat Cat said anxiously. I know. Nietion answered. The pain on his face spread throughout his body, causing his face to contort. Of course, he wanted to stop Emo, but he couldn't even get close to Emo. How could he stop him? The seal only exists on the platform. You must find a way to get to the platform. Fat Cat's voice sounded again. But there was nothing he could do at this time. The restriction on the altar was simply too powerful. It would take at least a few months to break through it. And now, Emo was about to activate the fiendish blood scroll. Nietion, I'll send you to the altar. At that moment, Huairu suddenly spoke. A black object the size of a baby's fist appeared on his palm. It looked like a round stone, but it was densely covered in black runes. Furthermore, it emitted an extremely dark aura. It was extremely strange. What is this? Nietion endured the pain and asked in a deep voice. That's a hell seed born from the hellfire crucible, Huairu said, his eyes burning with passion. It contains the purest hexing power of hell, and is strong enough to resist the warding power of the frigid dais. Nietion's eyes widened. Never could he have guessed that the hellfire crucible would contain something so terrifying. The Cold Fiend altar was built by the ancestors of the Cold Fiend winged race, and the restriction power inside it was extremely strong. The Hell Seed was actually able to resist the altar's restriction. It was truly terrifying. Nietion looked at Huairu, unsure what he was going to do next. He could sense that the Hell Seed contained a terrifying power. Huairu couldn't possibly ask him to swallow the Hell Seed. At that moment, Huairu looked at the others and said in a loud voice, Everyone, listen up. The seed of hell needs to absorb bloodline power in order to germinate and grow. Now, please pour your bloodline power into the seed of hell and help Nye Tian ascend the Tao platform. The faces of the others stiffened when they heard this. Clearly, they weren't very willing. Clearly, they didn't believe Huairu's words. How could there be such a miraculous seed in the world that needed to absorb bloodline power in order to germinate and grow? Some people even thought that the hell seed Huairu had taken out was a trap to absorb their bloodline power. "I'll go first." A voice rang out and a cultivator stepped forward. It was none other than Feng Qi. Nye Tian looked at Feng Qi and nodded. Feng Qi nodded as well. Then, he released his bloodline power and poured it into the hell seed. At this moment, a miraculous scene happened. Crack, crack, crack. The hell seed suddenly split open, and a tender sprout appeared. When the crowd saw this, their eyes trembled violently, and their expressions became sluggish. The hell seed was so miraculous that it really sprouted after absorbing bloodline power. Then, the tiny sprout began to grow and instantly grew into a small sapling that was about half a meter tall. However, the sapling was not green. Instead, it was black with black runes flowing on it. It was actually the aura of the hell demonic flame. However, Feng Qi's bloodline power was obviously limited, and he could only make the hell seed grow to about half a meter tall. "Let me do it." Then, Qin Jingyue stepped forward and directly poured his bloodline power into the hell tree. Crack, crack, crack. Then, the hell tree grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, it only grew to about a meter tall before it stopped. "Let me do it, let me do it." When the others saw this, although they still had doubts in their hearts, they couldn't care less. One after another, they released their bloodline power and poured it into the hell tree. Once the hell tree obtained the nutrients, it immediately began to grow rapidly. 5 meters, 10 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters. In just the blink of an eye, the hell tree had actually grown to a huge tree that was thousands of meters tall. Moreover, the hell tree was still growing, and it was growing toward the altar. As the hell tree continued to grow bigger, everyone felt a sense of oppression. Everyone retreated and looked at the hell tree with fear in their eyes. The only people who could get close to the hell tree were Nye Tian and Huairu. At the same time, the cold blood scroll in the sacred world seed also began to slowly unseal. Waves of extremely cold air were released from the sacred world seed and spread around the altar. TQR1 This was the power of the extreme cold ice seal that sealed the cold blood scroll. If the cold blood scroll was opened, the power of the extreme cold ice seal would be released, and everyone on the altar would instantly turn into ice slag. The extreme demon destruction seal on Nye Tian's face was even more terrifying. The wound on his face had already reached the point where one could see the bone. Nye Tian endured the intense pain and looked at the hell tree with a burning gaze. Soon, the hell tree finally touched the altar. "Nye Tian, get on the altar." Huairu's eyes flickered as he looked at Nye Tian and said, "Okay." Nye Tian nodded heavily. Without any hesitation, he directly stepped on the hell tree. The moment he stepped on the hell tree, he immediately felt the power of the restriction in the space disappear. Huairu was right. The power of the hell tree could indeed resist the altar's restriction. Immediately, Nye Tian's figure leaped up and flew toward the sky. Soon, he arrived at the edge of the altar. At this moment, Nye Tian felt an immense pressure from the restriction. However, the pressure disappeared the moment it got close to the hell tree. Nye Tian took a deep breath. If it weren't for the hell tree, he would never have been able to get on the altar. "Nye Tian, why are you so stubborn?" However, at this moment, Emo suddenly turned around and fixed Nye Tian with a pair of cold, murderous eyes. Then, he said in a cold voice. Chapter 2995. Nye Tian landed on the altar and stared coldly at Emo with a pair of extremely grim eyes. The moment his figure landed, the hell tree began to wither. In the blink of an eye, it turned back into a hell seed. Hua Iru put away the seed of hell and revealed a strange smile at the corner of his mouth. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on Nye Tian, and no one paid attention to Hua Iru. Countless eyes were staring at Nye Tian. Whether Nye Tian could stop Emo or not was related to everyone's life and death. Emo, give up. There are other ways to open the frigid fiend blood scroll, and there's no need to sacrifice so many people. Nye Tian looked at Emo and spoke in a deep voice. At this point, do you think I can give up? Asked Emo in a low voice. After that, he landed on the platform. Now that it was the most crucial moment of the Blood Frost Scripture's activation, he would not allow Nye Tian to approach the sacred world seed. Emo, do we really have to fight? The wound on Nye Tian's face deepened, but he still didn't want to completely break off relations with Emo. Enough with the nonsense. You have your principles, I have mine. Emo's eyes were filled with killing intent as he said solemnly, make your move. Boom. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, Emo's body trembled and 2 pairs of black wings appeared on his back. When they spread out, they were hundreds of meters long. The moment the 2 pairs of black wings appeared, the chill in the air instantly doubled. It was as if space itself was about to be frozen in an instant. Demonic frigid wings. Nye Tian stared at the black wings on Emo's back and his eyes narrowed. Of course, he recognized the demonic frigid wings of the demonic frigid wings clan. He had seen how powerful the demonic frigid wings were when he first met Emo. Moreover, Emo's second pair of fiendish cold wings had only been successfully condensed with Nye Tian's help. He didn't expect that he would have to fight Emo to the death at this moment. Emo's current ability was that of a demi-saint, the same as Nye Tian. However, by relying on the 2 pairs of fiendish cold wings, his battle prowess far surpassed that of martial artists of the same level. Kill. The next moment, Emo let out a low roar. 2 pairs of cold demon wings shook in the void at the same time. Suddenly, countless cold demon blades appeared, like a sky full of arrows, spreading towards Nye Tian. Sword cutting 8 desolation. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he roared in a low voice. After which, starlight heaven furiously slashed out. Sword images whizzed out, directly dissipating the cold baleful blades and forcing Emo to retreat several hundred meters. Nye Tian, it seems that I've underestimated you. Emo steadied his body, his eyes filled with ferocity and killing intent. He really did not expect Nye Tian's battle prowess to be so strong that it was on par with him. Emo, it's not too late to stop now. Don't make the same mistake again. Nye Tian frowned and growled before looking at the seed in the sky. Within the sacred world seed, streams of saint energy continuously flowed into the baleful cold blood scroll, and the extreme cold ice seal was slowly being opened. However, Nye Tian noticed that the baleful cold blood scroll had not been completely opened, as if something was missing. I'm fighting for my clansmen. Am I wrong? Emo growled. He directly leapt into the air, and his 2 pairs of cold demon wings suddenly closed in the sky. 2 terrifying icicles appeared, piercing through the void, extremely sharp, and shot towards Nye Tian. Boom! Nye Tian frowned and slashed out with his sword, blocking the 2 icicles. Although Emo looked as if he wanted to kill, Nye Tian could feel that he was still holding back. Right now, Emo only wanted to delay Nye Tian. He did not want to kill him. However, at this moment, the extreme demon annihilation seal on Nye Tian's face became even more terrifying. An extremely violent dark energy rushed into his body, as if it wanted to tear him apart. Nye Tian, you don't have time. Kill him. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. If he delayed any longer and the baleful cold blood scroll was opened, it would be terrible. Emo, I'm sorry. Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly. Then, his entire body's chi surged and the sword intent around him became extremely violent and sharp. Nye Tian, you forced me to do this. Emo felt Nye Tian's chi and his eyes darkened. He let out a low roar and the cold chi around him suddenly increased. As expected, he did not use his full strength just now. He was delaying Nietian. At this moment the two of them were going to give it their all. Because there was no way out for them. Everyone's eyes were trembling and they did not dare to blink, for fear that they would miss the most exciting scene. Cold demon, demon killer! At this moment, Emo roared and his two pairs of cold demon wings fluttered in the air. Immediately, a cold vortex appeared and whizzed towards Nietian. Crack, crack, crack! The cold fiendish vortex suddenly exploded in mid-air, and a terrifying cold fiendish power burst out, instantly freezing the surrounding space. The next moment, a terrifying cold chi spread towards Nietian. It was extremely terrifying. Sacred heaven-defying sword, earth sword engulfs the moon. Seeing this, Nietian did not dare to be careless. He slashed out with his sword and all the sword intent in his body gathered in an instant. A shadow of a sword was shot out with tremendous chi. Bang, bang, bang. Then, the shadow of the sword was like a wild dragon. Everywhere it passed, the frozen space collapsed. Huh! Emo's eyes trembled and his expression was extremely shocked. He did not expect Nietian's strength to be so terrifying. He had the same cultivation level as Nietian, but he had two pairs of cold demon wings. Moreover, his strength had increased tremendously in the baleful cold altar. Even so, he was still no match for Nietian. Bang! In the next moment, the power of the sword erupted and the cold vortex was directly swallowed. Emo's figure flew out and landed heavily on the platform. His figure retreated rapidly. However, in the next moment, the demon wings on Emo's back shook and his figure stabilized. Nietian's sword was merciful. If he had used his full strength, Emo would have been a corpse by now. Nietian shot a glance at Emo, then blurred into motion and flew towards the sacred world seed. No! Emo's eyes suddenly trembled and he screamed. Then, he shot into the sky and attacked Nietian. He would not allow Nietian to destroy the opening of the cold blood scroll. Nietian's figure was very fast and he approached the seed of the sacred world in an instant. However, when he was only 100 meters away from the seed of the sacred world, he suddenly felt that his demonic eye was about to explode. The sudden pain made him stagnate and he almost lost control of his body. At the same time, Emo's figure arrived. When he saw that Nietian had suddenly stopped, he could not help but be stunned. TQR1 boom! However, at this moment, the seed of the sacred world suddenly shook violently. Then, a wave of power surged out and condensed into a giant skeletal hand in the air. Huh! When Nietian saw the giant skeletal hand, he could not help but be shocked. This giant skeletal hand was the same one that they had seen at the entrance of the huge cave. Young man from the wings of the glacial evil clan, I need your blood to truly open it. In the next moment, the evil eye appeared on the cold blood scroll again. At the same time, a deep voice was heard in the void. Boom! Then, the skeletal hand shot out and clawed at Emo. It turned out that the cold blood scroll not only needed to absorb the power of the seed of the sacred world, but also needed the blood of the wings of the glacial evil clan as a sacrifice. Chapter 2996. A low murderous voice suddenly rang out from within the blood-frigid codex. The giant skeletal hand reappeared in the void, and it was heading straight for Emo. According to the voice in the blood-frigid codex, the activation of the blood-frigid codex required the blood sacrifice of the wings of cold frost. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! The giant skeletal hand clawed down violently from the air. Wherever its fingers passed, the space was torn apart, and a terrifying aura burst out like a tsunami, pressing down on Emo. The sudden turn of events stunned Emo, and he actually paused for a moment. He did want to activate the blood-frigid codex, but he had absolutely no intention of sacrificing himself. He was responsible for the rise of the wings of cold frost, so his life was naturally of paramount importance. Whoosh! In the next instant, Emo came to his senses. Terrifying cold frost gushed out of his body, turning into countless ice blades that shrouded the giant skeletal hand. However, such an attack could not stop the giant skeletal hand's attack at all. Tian looked at Emo and his eyes narrowed. He had witnessed the power of the giant skeletal hand with his own eyes. Kuyo Oniguchi and several other powerful martial artists had only managed to block a single blow from the giant skeletal hand, and they had all suffered serious injuries. Emo was only a first-level demi-saint, and his combat ability was not even as good as Tian's. How could he possibly block the giant skeletal hand? Boom! Immediately, the giant skeletal hand descended from the sky and grabbed Emo tightly. Arg! In an instant, an extremely terrifying pressure was exerted on Emo's body, and he could not help but howl in agony. Ha ha ha! At that moment, a cold and murderous voice rang out from the blood-frigid codex again, and it laughed wildly. You're not simple, kid. You actually have the purest bloodline of the wings of cold frost. Not only did your blood help me escape from the blood-frigid codex, but it also helped me recover a lot of my strength. Ha! The wild laughter reverberated in the air, and it was filled with insolence and violence. It was as if this person had been imprisoned within the baleful cold blood scroll, and at this moment, he was using the opening of the baleful cold blood scroll to escape. Clearly, he did not want to directly kill Emo. Instead, he wanted to pull Emo into the Saint's World Seed so that Emo's blood could be used to its greatest extent and recover his strength to the greatest extent possible. Emo. When Tian saw Emo being grabbed by the skeletal hand, his eyes darkened and he growled. Tian, you must stop the cold blood scroll from opening. Just then, the fat cat's voice rang out, shouting anxiously. If the fiendish cold blood scroll was opened, not only would the entire sacred soul domain be frozen, but a terrifying demon would also be born, which would definitely threaten the entire sacred soul domain. Yes. Tian nodded solemnly, after which, the blood in his entire body boiled, and the blood chi outside his body surged. In an instant, his sword intent was pushed to the extreme. 9 limits of starry sky, heaven slash. In the next instant, he roared and unleashed the starlight heaven slash. A blood-colored sword shadow appeared and slashed at the skeletal hand. Ant! The deep voice in the fiendish cold blood scroll was extremely cold. Then, the skeletal hand moved slightly and the blood-colored sword shadow was smashed into pieces. Bang! At the same time, a terrifying wave of energy rushed over and a muffled sound rang out in the air. Tian's silhouette was directly blown away, leaving a trail of blood in the air. He was too weak, and could not fight against the person in the fiendish cold blood scroll at all. QL 11-inch? You actually have that thing in your body? Looks like I'm going to be very lucky this time. Seeing that Tian was not dead, the person in the fiendish cold blood scroll couldn't help but be surprised. Then, he laughed coldly. In Tian's body, he sensed something that made him ecstatic. Tian steadied himself. His face was as pale as paper. It was extremely unsightly. Young man, you just watch from the side. After I absorb the blood of this young man from the Wings clan, it'll be your turn. The person in the fiendish cold blood scroll spoke again. Then, an extremely cold energy appeared and directly enveloped Tian. In an instant, Tian felt the space around him being wrapped up by a terrifying energy. His body couldn't move at all. Tian. Seeing this, everyone's eyes trembled violently. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Right now, their only chance of survival was with Tian. If Tian failed, they definitely wouldn't be able to live. But now, Tian was being controlled by the person in the fiendish cold blood scroll. How could they not panic? The worst thing was that they could only watch. They couldn't help Tian at all. They were in the middle of the altar and were under the terrifying pressure. Right now, many people couldn't even stand up, let alone climb up the altar. Young man from the Wings clan, come in. Let me enjoy your blood. At that moment, a cold voice was heard in the sky. The skeletal hand suddenly moved and pulled Emo into the sacred seed. Emo! Seeing this, Nye Tion's eyes trembled and he screamed. However, he couldn't move. He couldn't save Emo at all. Young man from the Wings clan, I've been trapped in the fiendish cold blood scroll by your ancestors for countless years. Today, I'm finally going to break free. This is all thanks to you. Ah! The person in the fiendish cold blood scroll laughed wildly. Right now, as long as he absorbed Emo's blood, he would be able to break free from the fiendish cold blood scroll. Once he walked out of the fiendish cold blood scroll, the world in front of him definitely wouldn't be able to contain him. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. Just as the violent sound was heard, Emo's body suddenly trembled. Then, more than a dozen wounds appeared on his body. Blood poured out like a fountain, and the fiendish cold blood scroll kept absorbing it. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. The fiendish cold blood scroll absorbed the blood and produced a strange sound. The pair of evil eyes on the scroll slowly became clearer. They were no longer in a blurry state, as if they were solidifying. Evil eyes of Burying Realm. This guy is the Burying Shura. At that moment, the fat cat suddenly screamed in shock. His expression was extremely shocked. He never thought that the person sealed inside the fiendish cold blood scroll was the Burying Shura. Burying Shura. Nye Tion's eyes flickered when he heard the fat cat's voice, and he yelled out. As soon as he spoke, a surprised voice came from the fiendish cold blood scroll. How do you know my name? The world Burying Azura would never have thought that Nye Tion would say his name. He was someone that existed before the ancient times. How did Nye Tion know his name? Could it be? Suddenly, the Burying Shura thought of something and blurted out in shock. Could it be that your demonic eye has awakened the ability to detect ghosts? He clearly sensed that Nye Tion had only awakened his demonic eye not long ago. It was unlikely that he had awakened the ability to detect ghosts. Detecting ghosts, the forbidden ability of the demonic eye. According to the legends, it was an ability that allowed one to see the past and the future. Chapter 2997. The world Burying Azura did not believe that Nye Tion's demon eye had awakened the ability to detect ghosts. However, he could not understand why Nye Tion would know his name. However, he calmed down in the next moment. Nye Tion was now completely under his control. He would naturally know whether the demon eye had awakened the ability to detect ghosts after he seized it. Ha ha ha! The world Burying Azura could not help but laugh wildly. As long as he could merge with the demon eye, his strength would at least recover to the sage realm. The territory in front of him could not accommodate a sage like him. The world Burying Azura's laughter rang in Nye Tion's ears. His face turned extremely ugly. It seemed like he could not stop the world Burying Azura in his current state. He could only watch the world Burying Azura kill Emo and break free from the shackles of the evil cold blood scroll. At this moment, Emo's body was bleeding even more profusely. His entire body was already covered in blood. The evil cold blood scroll began to open slowly under the stimulation of the blood. The evil cold blood scroll is finally opening. The world Burying Azura's violent voice rang out again. It was extremely cold and ruthless. I've been imprisoned for so many years. I'm finally going to be free. The world Burying Azura shouted wildly. I'm going to bring a baptism of blood to this world. I'm going to make this world tremble and cry in blood and death. The maniacal voice resounded throughout the altar, causing it to tremble uncontrollably. The world Burying Azura's reputation was not just for show. The first thing he would do after breaking free was to slaughter all the living beings in the sacred soul domain. The people below looked at the sacred realm seed in a daze. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. They had no idea how powerful the world Burying Azura was. However, they had personally experienced his monstrous aura. Without a doubt, if the world-burying Azura really broke free from the shackles of the evil cold blood scroll, the entire sacred soul domain would welcome a catastrophe. The people present would become the first victims of the world-burying Azura. Fat, is the world-burying Azura a real sage? At this moment, Nye Tian did not panic. Instead, there was a kind of solemn calmness in his eyes as he asked in a low voice. Fat Cat was stunned for a moment. She did not know why Nye Tian would ask such a question, but she still said, "The buried Azura was a terminator before the immemorial age. At his peak, he was already at the peak of the saint state. I don't know how long he has been imprisoned in the cold evil blood scroll, but with his strength, once he escapes, he will at least have the battle strength of a sage." When Nye Tian heard what Fat Cat said, his eyes darkened, but he was not afraid at all. Can the extreme demon annihilation seal kill a saint? Nye Tian spoke again at the next moment. Extreme demon destruction seal? When Fat Cat heard Nye Tian suddenly mention the extreme devil annihilation seal, her eyes couldn't help trembling, and she asked in shock, "Nye Tian, what do you want to do?" "Kill a saint." Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he spat out 2 words coldly. When Fat Cat heard those 2 words, she froze. Nye Tian's idea was just too crazy. Killing a saint. 2 simple words were enough to shock the entire myriad domains. The myriad domains had existed for an unknown period of time, and not a single sage had appeared. Now, Nye Tian wanted to kill a saint with the strength of a first-level demi-saint. It was absolutely shocking. Just when Fat Cat was petrified, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out and said, "The extreme demon annihilation seal might have the power to kill a saint." Neither Fat Cat nor the Ghost Emperor knew how much power the extreme demon annihilation seal contained. The Ghost Emperor was only guessing that the extreme demon annihilation seal might really have the power to kill a saint. The reason why Nye Tian dared to say the words Saint Annihilation Seal was obviously because he wanted to use the power of the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal. The Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal was his last chance. Nye Tian, even if the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal really does have the power to kill a saint, you won't be able to withstand the power of the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal with your strength. Fat Cat finally opened her mouth and said in horror, "Trading my life for the lives of everyone in the sacred spirit region. It's worth a try." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and his eyes revealed a terrifying calmness. If the world-burying Azura broke free, then everyone in the sacred spirit region would die. If Nye Tian used the Extreme Demon Annihilation Seal to kill the world-burying Azura, it would be equivalent to trading his life for the lives of everyone in the sacred spirit region. Moreover, even if he did not do that, the world-burying Azura would not let him live after breaking free from the icy blood scroll. Instead of waiting for death, it was better to risk his life. Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor knew that Nye Tian had made up his mind, so they said no more. The icy blood scroll is about to open. At this moment, the world-burying Azura's voice sounded again, and an extremely strange scene was happening in the sacred world seed. The world-burying evil eye on the icy blood scroll became extremely clear, and behind the evil eye, an illusory face gradually appeared. A person was walking out of the icy blood scroll. As the fiendish cold blood scroll opened, the figure became clearer and clearer. The entire sacred world seed was filled with terrifying runes, and the aura of burying the world was released, permeating the icy blood altar. Just this aura of burying the world made everyone feel an unusually heavy pressure, as if there was a mountain pressing down on their heads. Nye Tian looked at the figure walking out of the icy blood scroll, and his eyes were not filled with fear, but an extreme provocation. Boom! At this moment, the divine and demon power in his body began to go berserk, rushing into his body like a broken dam, and rushing towards the extreme demon annihilation seal under his demon eye. Under the impact of the divine and demon power, the extreme demon annihilation seal instantly became even more violent. Boom! In the next instant, a blood-colored halo was released from the extreme demon annihilation seal, and like a ripple, it spread in all directions, shattering the surrounding spacetime that had been imprisoned. Look, Nye Tion's figure is moving. The crowd below could not help but exclaim at the bizarre scene, their expressions extremely shocked. Who would have thought that Nye Tion would actually move at this moment? Huh! The world-burying Azura could not help but exclaim at the scene in the sky, and then he realized something, and his blurry face revealed a look of shock. He had never thought that Nye Tion was actually releasing the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal. A first-stage demi-saint forcefully using the extreme demon annihilation seal. Was he not courting death? Nye Tion saw that the world-burying Azura was afraid, and his lips curled into a faint smile as he said coldly, "World-burying Azura, it seems that the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal can really kill you." At this moment, the power of the extreme demon annihilation seal was wreaking havoc in his body, almost tearing him apart. However, Nye Tion did not seem to feel pain at all. There was not a hint of pain on his face, and he was even maintaining a calm smile. "Fatty, I'll leave the 9 extremities to you," Nye Tion said in the next moment.